As evening settled over the city, Lunyan barely noticed the sky. Clutching a huge pink gift bag, he was boiling with anger after striking out in his 18th job interview. Companies only cared about cheap labor, ignoring actual skills and expecting applicants to settle for miserable wages. Trying to push the frustration aside, he turned his thoughts to the woman he loved. He didn't get the job, but his delivery gig was enough to make some cash, and that was exactly how he managed to buy the anniversary cake for the two of them. But as he got close to home, something felt off. A strange noise coming from a parked car made him stop. The moment he recognized Yuchi's voice inside, talking suspiciously with someone else, and openly admitting to cheating on him, reality hit like a truck. The love and support he thought he had were nothing but a lie. Rage took over his face. With his blood boiling, Lunyan crushed the pink bag so hard that the plastic ripped apart, completely ruining the cake. Just as he was about to lose control, the loud ringtone from his phone shattered the silence, snapping him back to reality. On the screen, his mother's panicked face brought news far worse than any betrayal. His father and younger brother were on the verge of death. Frozen in shock, he let the ruined cake crash to the ground, swallowed the anger from what he had just witnessed, and sprinted straight to the hospital. When he got there, it looked like something out of a nightmare. The doctors bluntly explained that both patients were suffering from severe brain failure. A nurse quietly admitted that every bed was filled with victims trapped in the exact same mysterious coma, and none of the specialists had the slightest clue how to stop it. Finding his mother in tears, he overheard another woman desperately breaking down in the hallway. Her son had also collapsed after spending hours playing an incredibly popular game. The whole situation sounded insane. The game's servers were located overseas, and even when players destroyed their gaming equipment, it somehow reappeared as if nothing had ever happened. Putting all the pieces together, Lunyan finally understood what was happening. Right after losing his job, his father had thrown himself into that exact game along with his younger brother. The two had even started a live streaming team, hoping to make money online. What was supposed to save the family financially had turned into a death sentence. Standing around wasn't an option. Holding the immersion headset in his hands, he knew it was the only way into that cursed virtual world. This wasn't just another video game. It was a deadly trap, and he had to uncover the truth. The moment he put on the headset, a blue glow lit up his determined face. The system instantly pulled him in, dropping him straight into the continent of glory. The peaceful start didn't last long. As soon as he entered the beginner zone, a bizarre creature that looked like a girl wearing a white shirt charged straight at him. Without hesitating, he pulled the assault rifle from his starter pack and wiped the monster out in seconds. The rush of adrenaline hit immediately, proving that even at level 3, he already packed enough firepower to do serious damage. As the creature dissolved into smoke, a glowing crystal appeared on the ground. The game explained that these monsters were born from the overwhelming hatred of people betrayed in love, but Lunyan ignored the tragic backstory and focused on the reward instead. He picked up a handful of coins along with a valuable spirit stone that immediately caught his attention. While storing the loot in his backpack with a grin on his face, he realized fighting monsters paid way better than wasting time gathering herbs. But the celebration ended instantly. A brutal sneak attack slammed into him, sending a powerful electric shock through his entire body and leaving him completely paralyzed. The cheap shot caught him completely off guard, filling him with anger more than fear. Before he could recover, a group of players surrounded him, mocking a low-level rookie for wandering around alone. Then the situation got even worse as a familiar face stepped out from the crowd. It was Yuchi, wearing that same arrogant grin. Seeing his rival was the final straw. Without a second thought, Lunyan pulled out a stink bomb and detonated it. A disgusting toxic cloud instantly filled the air, forcing the enemies to cover their noses and back away. The plan was simple but effective. Taking advantage of the opening, he sprinted away, smiling to himself, convinced his tactical escape had saved his life. But his relief lasted only a few seconds. A long blade suddenly pierced straight through his back with horrifying force. The pain was so intense that his vision went black, and the virtual world itself seemed to shake. The realism of that world was terrifying, completely erasing the line between a game and reality. As he collapsed, Yuchi walked over just to rub it in. With a smug grin, his rival sarcastically thanked him for all the support, proudly revealing that he had stolen not only his ex-girlfriend and his live streaming team, but also the job he was supposed to get. To make things even worse, another member of the group, Chow, stepped forward to finish him off. Wearing a sadistic smile, the attacker mocked the loot he was about to steal. His eyes locked on the coins and the spirit stone. Another savage strike sliced through the air, sending blood spraying everywhere in a gruesome scene. Lying on the freezing ground, the protagonist struggled to stay conscious, tormented by unbearable physical pain that should never have been possible inside a digital world. The icy touch of death proved that dying in that digital world was terrifyingly real. But just when the darkness should have been permanent, the young man woke up. Instead of respawning in a beginner zone, he was welcomed by voices filled with absolute loyalty. Two female warriors celebrated his return, treating him with the utmost respect. It was immediately obvious they weren't ordinary players. Things became even stranger when Sudi, a red-haired warrior with a bold attitude, wondered if her master had lost his memories. A moment later, a blue-haired girl handed him a mirror and confirmed the impossible. He was the supreme king of this place. The reflection genuinely shocked him. His long hair and the bizarre mark across his face gave him an intimidating, almost monstrous appearance. Searching for answers, the two subordinates explained that they had been guarding the ancient tomb of the demon race. Lunyan quickly put the pieces together. A massive system bug had completely changed his fate, placing him inside the body of the story's infamous final villain. The pain of betrayal and the misery of his real life disappeared in an instant, swallowed by an overwhelming feeling of absolute power. Now, he was the one making the rules. This new reality demanded nothing from him while giving him everything. Leaving both his painful past and memories of his ex behind, he accepted Sudi's suggestion to wash away the traces of his rebirth and focus on restoring his strength. As he walked through the grand hall, the new demon lord found himself standing before a gigantic, luxurious pool completely covered with flowers. Without wasting a second, he stepped into the warm water and was immediately greeted by the rich aroma of wine. The level of detail in this world was so incredible that even the smells felt completely real. His subordinate explained that this wasn't an ordinary bath. Suddenly, the game's system activated. Notifications flooded his vision one after another, announcing that he had just unlocked a top-tier secret class. At that exact moment, a blinding golden aura erupted around his body. Gravity itself seemed to disappear as his mind was flooded with an endless stream of new knowledge, battle strategies, and incredible power. The final system notification revealed an incredibly powerful secret ability, the power to instantly summon a magical weapon, though it could only be used 3 times. Before he had the chance to test it, the mood suddenly shifted. News arrived that Shingun Bao had entered the palace. Joshime immediately warned him that the visitor was a traitor to the immortal kingdom, and if he discovered the true identity of the new demon lord, the consequences would be catastrophic. To avoid any risk, Sudi cast a powerful concealment spell. The protagonist's body became completely invisible, erasing his presence entirely. He loved the strategy, especially since he didn't have to lift a finger. The other guardian hurried everyone along before anyone became suspicious, and together they headed straight for the ancestral hall. When they arrived, the intruder's arrogance was unbelievable. Shengun Bao was already lounging comfortably on the throne, surrounded by heavily armed followers and overflowing with confidence. Seeing someone disrespect her master's throne made Sudi's blood boil. She charged without hesitation, only to have her attack blocked by one of the guard's massive battle axes. With murderous crimson eyes, the warrior refused to back down. Her second strike was devastating, slicing across the brute's face and forcing the giant backward. Terrified by her overwhelming strength, the guard shouted for everyone to lower their weapons and listen to their leader, declaring with complete confidence that Shengun Bao was now the one making all the rules. Hidden by his camouflage, the young lord listened carefully to every word. The henchman's absolute confidence immediately raised a red flag in his mind. Standing by while invaders tried to seize control of his territory awakened a dangerous and uncontrollable rage deep inside him. From his invisible position, he watched the red-haired warrior with growing admiration. Even after 1,000 years, the demon woman's loyalty hadn't wavered in the slightest, and the sheer pressure of her strength almost felt tangible. As the situation unfolded, the truth about the game finally became clear to him. This had never been just another game. It was actually a cruel selection system created by a so-called Heavenly Father. Its incredible realism attracted countless players, while the promise that dying inside the game carried no real-world consequences was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. Everything changed when Shen formed a dark alliance with evil entities, allowing monsters to drain the life force of players. What had once been entertainment turned into a slaughterhouse. The strongest players were dragged deep beneath the earth, slowly wasting away as their life energy was mercilessly drained. It became obvious that Shen hadn't come for a peaceful conversation. His goal was to conquer 3 entire worlds. Hearing that plan sent a chill down the young lord's spine. The coming war was unavoidable, and the rules of the game no longer meant anything. Shen continued pressuring the red-haired warrior, questioning her about the Emperor's return with calculated sarcasm. He clearly sensed that something was off, and the true Emperor's soul was far too valuable for him to ignore. The demon woman stood her ground, firmly denying every accusation. Wearing a mocking smile, Shen delivered his ultimatum. He offered freedom to her and her sisters, as long as they handed over undeniable proof of the Emperor's reincarnation, manipulating their emotions as though they were nothing more than pieces on a chessboard. Shen didn't wait for a response. He glanced over his shoulder before disappearing into the palace corridors, taking his elite guards with him and leaving behind an overwhelming pressure that lingered in the air. The moment he was gone, a heavy silence filled the hall. All 3 guardians immediately turned toward their master, their voices carrying a level of concern they had never shown before. Despite the tension, the young man's focus wasn't on the chaos inside the game but on his top priority, saving his family from that slow, mysterious death. Sensing their master's unwavering determination, the demon women bowed and renewed their vows of loyalty. The conviction in their voices left no room for doubt. They were willing to die for him if necessary. Sudi presented a majestic seal and explained that only the blood of the true emperor could unlock it. Pretending he couldn't remember the artifact's secrets, Lunyan asked her how it worked. The red-haired warrior quietly recited the necessary incantation, and the moment the final words were spoken, a violent golden light erupted around them. The seal floated into the air, shining so brightly that Lunyan had to shield his eyes and take a step back. His heart raced as he reached toward the blinding light, unsure of what he was about to awaken. The glow finally faded, revealing an ancient sword suspended in midair. It was an imposing weapon, but one clearly scarred by centuries of battle. A system notification appeared, celebrating his acquisition of a rare item and confirming that the seal could still be unlocked even after its original owner's death. Even so, Lunyan couldn't bring himself to get excited. He stared at the battered blade with suspicion. It looked like it had been forged in the fires of countless wars, and its worn condition hinted at a past far heavier than he could imagine. Before he could complain about the sword's rough appearance, Sudi interrupted him, explaining that the weapon's true potential was enormous, but unlocking it would require extremely rare materials. Ever practical, Lunyan didn't waste time dwelling on it. Since those resources were impossible to find right now, he decided that his AK rifle, a weapon he already knew and trusted, would handle the job for the time being. Realizing he was about to leave, Sudi rushed over and embraced him, softly begging him not to stay away for too long. The reincarnated lord gently stroked her hair and promised he would return, but the urgency of his mission left no room for hesitation. The system, however, had other plans. The automatic teleport back to the village had been disabled by an unknown saboteur. The blue-haired guardian explained that because of the enormous distance, the only way out was through a jade seal. Lunyan accepted the challenge without hesitation. A true warrior was forged by overcoming obstacles from the very beginning. The instant he activated the seal, a pillar of icy blue light surrounded him, dissolving the ancient tomb and wiping away its eerie silence. The guardians remained behind, their voices blending together in a heartfelt prayer for his safe return. As the light faded, reality hit him all at once. He was back in the familiar starting area, and his appearance had reverted to that of an ordinary beginner, as if his awakening as the Demon Lord had never happened. But he didn't even have a second to process it. An angry crowd suddenly appeared out of nowhere, grabbing him by the arms and dragging him toward the place where the wild boss had spawned. The air was thick with the crowd's outrage, while Lunyan stayed calm, silently observing everything around him. An uneasy silence hung over the area, making him feel like nothing more than a background character in someone else's story. Then it was shattered by a sharp, commanding female voice ordering everyone to clear the way. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Moments later, the owner of the voice appeared. A breathtakingly beautiful young woman moved with such incredible grace that she almost seemed to float, effortlessly knocking aside anyone foolish enough to block her path. Despite wearing a flawless white dress and having angelic features, the woman's gaze was as sharp as a blade. It was obvious she brought far more trouble than help. Lunyan remained frozen, unable to take his eyes off her. She walked forward with absolute confidence, completely unfazed by the chaos surrounding her. Even in the middle of the crisis, he couldn't help feeling instantly drawn to her, an inconvenient thought crossing his mind at the worst possible moment. On her back, wings formed from wind and lightning shimmered brilliantly, a legendary movement technique that almost no one present had ever witnessed in person. Ahead of them, the level 3 demonic ginseng roared. The monstrous spirit root fiercely guarded its priceless fruit. The enormous tree was a deadly trap, seizing intruders with massive roots, crushing their bones, and violently slamming their bodies into the ground. Hidden behind a boulder, the protagonist calmly studied the battlefield. He was already calculating the most efficient way to collect the rare loot once the fighting was over. The young woman, however, had no intention of waiting. Her face hardened with determination as she drew her sword. She had absolutely no plans to share the rewards. With one swift, precise slash, she severed the first wave of roots and charged forward with the confidence of someone convinced she could defeat the monster alone. But the battle was far from over. Her confidence bordered on arrogance. She ignored the level difference as though victory were already guaranteed. Everything seemed almost too easy, and that alone was enough to trigger Lunyan's instincts. Neither of them noticed the danger in time. Cracks spread across the ground, and hidden vines burst upward as though the earth itself had chosen a side. In the blink of an eye, thick roots wrapped around both of their legs. The young woman, who had been fighting with everything she had, and Lunyan, who had only been watching, were both yanked off their feet, caught completely off guard. They found themselves trapped. It was humiliating, and escaping instantly became their only priority. While Lunyan struggled to make sense of what had happened, the woman stayed focused, carefully studying every movement of the enemy in search of an opening. The tree spirit moved with slow, deliberate precision, almost as if it were enjoying their helplessness. Thick yellow droplets began dripping from the vines, and the young woman quickly realized what they were: explosive fruit. She was exactly right. With a sharp pop, the sticky green substance detonated, completely covering both captives. Running out of patience, Lunyan demanded that she find a way out and fast. The tension was unbearable. She possessed a phoenix feather necklace, a legendary artifact capable of freeing them, but the awkward position they were trapped in made it impossible for her to reach it. In the middle of the chaos, Lunyan caught a faint, pleasant scent and blurted out a comment. She answered with an icy glare and a sharp order, telling him to stay still while she handled it. Ignoring her completely, he reached over and yanked the pink stone pendant from around her neck with one rough, far from gentle motion. Instead of thanking him for freeing her, the young woman exploded with anger. She wasn't furious because of what he had done, but because of how boldly and disrespectfully he had done it. Despite her protests, Lunyan activated the artifact. The sky split apart in flames as a colossal phoenix appeared, bathing the battlefield in brilliant light. The intense heat shook the demonic tree, causing its vines to loosen and instantly release both captives. The young woman watched in complete disbelief. She knew that spell normally took time to cast, yet he had activated it in the blink of an eye. The phoenix dominated the sky, circling the monster with rings of fire that drained its life force every second. Now safely out of danger, the surrounding players marveled at the artifact's value. Some complained about how unfair it was, while others, consumed by jealousy, were already wondering how they could get one for themselves. The relief didn't last long. The tree suddenly underwent a horrifying mutation, sprouting dozens of eyes and twisting into an even more grotesque form as it prepared another attack. Panic spread instantly. The phoenix feather was now on cooldown, meaning there wouldn't be a second chance. The color drained from the woman's face as the overwhelming demonic pressure filled the battlefield. With parts of his clothes torn to shreds, Lunyan stepped forward and declared that he'd finished the fight himself. The crowd immediately booed what they considered a suicide mission, insisting the monster's level was far too high for any solo player, no matter how lucky he was. Feng looked away, feeling completely cornered and out of options. Yet in the middle of all the chaos, Lunyan remained strangely calm. Holding a talisman between his teeth with a cocky grin on his face, he shouted a command and prepared to unleash the finishing blow. He launched himself straight at the monster, becoming one with the attack itself. The first impact was devastating. A crimson flash tore across the sky, instantly draining the creature's vitality. The spectators who had mocked him only moments earlier stood frozen in absolute shock. Somehow, the artifact had activated again, breaking every known rule of the game. Without giving the monster a chance to recover, Lunyan unleashed the final strike. The fiery phoenix engulfed the demonic tree, reducing everything that remained of its power to ashes. He landed calmly on the ground as if he had never been in danger at all, while everyone stared silently at his back, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The once unstoppable demonic ginseng was nothing more than a lifeless pile of debris. The crowd erupted immediately, caught between amazement and confusion over how such an impossible victory had happened. The system wasted no time. Notifications flashed across his vision, confirming his jump to level 12 along with a generous reward of gold and rare artifacts. Smiling to himself, Lunyan stored away the mutated starstone, the key item that would secure his next big boost in experience. Beside him, the young woman looked completely flustered, watching him with a spark of admiration he had never inspired before. But not everyone was celebrating. From a distance, Yuchi and his partner stared at him with faces twisted by hatred. It wasn't just the victory that bothered them, it was how effortlessly the so-called loser had become the center of everyone's attention. Jealous whispers quickly spread through the crowd as they accused him of cheating, claiming the object he held in his mouth was exploiting the game's rules. Hearing the rumors, Madame Feng narrowed her eyes, sensing that trouble was brewing. Feng carefully observed everything and couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was suspicious. The truth was that the talisman allowed any item to be activated 3 times instantly, giving its user an incredibly unfair advantage. But that trick came with an enormous price. After the 3rd use, the item turned to dust, and the talisman alone had cost enough to buy a luxury mansion. While Lunyan was still mentally calculating the enormous loss, he was suddenly surrounded by a group of excited girls trying to get close to him with obvious intentions. Watching the scene with barely concealed irritation, Feng immediately came up with a plan. She pushed through the crowd with an authority that silenced everyone in her path. When she finally stopped in front of him, Lunyan tensed up, still thinking about the expensive artifact he had just lost. But instead of demanding answers, she grabbed his face and kissed him right there in front of everyone. The entire crowd exploded in shock. The same players who had laughed at him only minutes earlier were now burning with jealousy and confusion. But Feng had a purpose. She quickly realized that the kiss hadn't produced the result she expected. Perhaps some kind of tracking seal or extraction technique had failed. Lunyan, embarrassed and still feeling guilty about wasting the phoenix feather, didn't even have time to react. Brushing off the loss of the priceless artifact as if it meant nothing, Feng suggested they head to the Bojua Tower, using the poor condition of his battle-damaged clothes as an excuse. She practically dragged him away with forced confidence. Her intentions were anything but kind. The kiss had simply been bait. She was furious and determined to uncover his secret by whatever means necessary. When they finally arrived at Feng's residence, Lunyan froze. The estate was so enormous and luxurious that it radiated pure nobility. As he walked through its grand halls, he couldn't resist his old habit. His eyes wandered across the walls, furniture, and decorations, mentally estimating the outrageous value of everything around him, trying to figure out what kind of people could possibly live in a place like this. The mansion was worth an unimaginable fortune. Feng casually looked around as if she owned the world before throwing herself onto the bed. At that moment, she finally understood the advice her father had always given her. It was dangerous to get too comfortable in a place this luxurious. On the other side of the room, the woman moved with deliberate slowness, filling the air with subtle hints and suggestions. She casually talked about finally relaxing and taking a bath after the battle, while warm water washed away the exhaustion. The heat eased her sore muscles, but Lunyan couldn't relax. The waiting kept him on edge, leaving him unable to focus on anything else. He tried to figure out what she was really planning. Fighting against his own restless thoughts, he sat on the edge of the bed as countless questions raced through his mind, making him even more uneasy. She had everything carefully planned out. The item she had purchased from the VIP section was a secret weapon designed to manipulate another person's will. She carefully applied the liquid compound, expecting its numbing effects to kick in at exactly the right moment. After finishing her bath, wearing nothing but a robe, she acted completely natural, trying to lower his guard with casual conversation. Feng simply gave him a thumbs up, pretending not to care. It was an almost comical gesture considering the tension in the room. When he finally came to his senses, the frustration remained. The situation was still unresolved. He tried to apologize, but she completely ignored him. Furious, she grabbed him and shook him, demanding an immediate and permanent solution. She insisted that he take responsibility and marry her. To prove how serious she was, she threw a book titled Masculine Virtue onto the floor before grabbing him by the collar and forcing the issue. He answered with a low growl, a silent declaration of possession that made it clear there was no turning back. Then he stood up, fixed his hair, and shifted the conversation, insisting they needed to prepare for Bojua Tower to avoid unnecessary trouble. Feng tossed a black card toward him. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. The card held 1 billion, and he was to handle the shopping without asking a single question. The moment he caught it, Lunyan froze. Holding that much money in his hands felt unreal. Until now, fortunes like that had only existed in rumors. He tried convincing himself he was doing it for the sake of his family, but a greedy smile slipped onto his face as he imagined everything that money could buy. After he walked out and the door closed behind him, her anger slowly faded, replaced by a strange mix of tenderness and curiosity. The setting sun transformed Bojua Tower into an untouchable monument, a place where wealth determined a person's worth. As Lunyan approached, he instinctively slowed down, intimidated by the outrageous entrance fee and the elite crowd that filled the building. A mocking voice suddenly broke the silence, instantly bringing back the bitter memory of his recent defeat. Turning around, he came face to face with his ex, clinging to her new boyfriend and making sure to flaunt the relationship just to provoke him. Chow, her new companion, wore an arrogant grin as he mocked Lunyan non-stop, while his ex happily joined in, savoring every opportunity to humiliate him. Lunyan, however, refused to take the bait. He calmly adjusted his tie, completely ignoring the pathetic show in front of him. None of them were worth responding to. When he reached the entrance, the receptionist casually explained the outrageous cost of accessing the VIP area. He didn't hesitate for a second. The situation reached its breaking point. Without Feng's black card, getting inside would have been impossible. Off to the side, the mocking continued. His ex's companion challenged Lunyan, saying that if he could actually pay the entrance fee, she would personally go inside with him, openly betting on his humiliation. The surrounding crowd eagerly gathered, expecting to witness another embarrassing failure. Lunyan stayed completely calm. With slow, deliberate movements, he pulled out the black card. Its matte surface reflected the light, instantly silencing everyone around him. The shock was immediate. What everyone had dismissed as a ridiculous bluff turned out to represent a level of wealth that nobody there could even imagine. The smug expressions on the couple's faces instantly disappeared, replaced by desperate excuses as they tried to convince everyone the card had to be fake. A bald security guard wearing dark sunglasses stepped into the middle of the commotion. In a stern voice, he accused Lunyan of carrying a counterfeit card and demanded an explanation. The tension reached its peak only to be shattered by the sharp beep of the payment terminal. The transaction had been approved. The silence that followed was absolute. The guard's aggressive attitude disappeared instantly, replaced by exaggerated respect as he stepped aside and welcomed Lunyan like the most important guest in the building. He then turned toward the blonde man, furiously scolding him for nearly causing a public scene with someone of such high status. Yuchi shrank back and instinctively hid behind her partner. Both of them looked completely shaken, struggling to process what had just happened. Desperately trying to salvage what little pride he had left, Chow pulled out a gold card and, forcing a confident smile, led his companion inside. The couple walked toward the entrance with an air of superiority, but reality hit them hard. Their card failed the verification check. Denied access to the VIP section, they had no choice but to swallow their pride and head to the regular entrance, disappearing into the crowd. The young woman was boiling with anger, barely able to contain herself as she struggled to understand how everything had turned against them. Inside the main hall, Lunyan positioned himself near the stage, quietly surveying the room and preparing for whatever came next. It didn't take long for Chow and his companion to show up behind him. The blonde man desperately tried convincing her that Lunyan's black card had to be stolen. The auction finally began. The owner of the tower, radiating confidence and authority, welcomed everyone before introducing the first item, a piece of icy jade incense infused with rare essences capable of strengthening powerful fighters. Excited whispers spread throughout the hall. Before the opening bid had even settled, the blonde man jumped to his feet and slammed down an outrageous offer. He wasn't bidding because he wanted the item, he simply wanted another chance to humiliate his rival. He expected Lunyan's silence to signal defeat, but the response came immediately. Without the slightest hesitation, Lunyan doubled the bid. His calm, effortless voice instantly silenced the room, leaving the blonde man and his companion speechless. Realizing that Lunyan's wealth was both genuine and seemingly limitless, the couple felt panic begin to set in as they desperately clung to what little dignity they still had. The auctioneer's gavel came down, making it official. The icy jade incense belonged to Lunyan, giving him an immediate tactical advantage over everyone else. Wearing a calculating smile, the hostess congratulated him before smoothly shifting everyone's attention to the next item, keeping the momentum of the auction alive. As Lunyan accepted the treasure, he was already planning how to squeeze every last bit of power from its rare essences. With his pride completely shattered, Chao desperately searched for excuses to explain away his loss, hoping to save face in front of his girlfriend. Meanwhile, none of the remaining auction items impressed Lunyan. Everything on display seemed ordinary until the final lot appeared. A dragon robe was unveiled. The garment, woven from golden threads and mysterious materials of unknown origin, radiated overwhelming power and nearly impenetrable defense. The moment Lunyan saw it, he felt an instinctive connection. His eyes carefully examined every detail, already calculating its strategic value. The price was astronomical, yet considering what it offered, it almost felt like a bargain. The room erupted into excited chatter. Both bidders and spectators speculated about how much that robe could change the outcome of future battles. Unable to take the pressure any longer, Chao stood up and pushed all of his remaining wealth into one final bid. The strain was obvious on his face, but deep down he was already celebrating, convinced that this display of wealth would restore his reputation and finally humiliate Lunyan. The audience applauded, feeding his ego even further. Then, in the middle of the excitement, Lunyan calmly rose to his feet, ready to end the auction. He announced his new bid. The number was so outrageous that even the hostess froze for a moment, unable to hide her shock. Absolute silence fell over the hall as everyone tried to process the sheer scale of his offer. Watching from nearby, the owner of the tower was already thinking about how to keep such an extraordinary customer coming back. There was no room for further competition. The auction ended right there. The dragon robe had a new owner. For Lunyan, it wasn't simply an expensive piece of equipment, it was proof of his victory and payback for every humiliation he had suffered in the past. Standing nearby, Yuchi watched her world crumble. Her resentment slowly gave way to cold calculation. She realized she had thrown away an opportunity far too valuable to lose. Almost immediately, she began plotting how to win him back, deciding that staying by his side would now be infinitely more rewarding than remaining where she was. Later, in a luxurious private room, Lunyan stood quietly in front of a mirror. Wearing his newly acquired robe, he noticed how confidence and elegance had become second nature to him. The silence was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Yuchi stepped inside cautiously, carefully judging how he might react. She quietly began apologizing, already expecting to be rejected. Lunyan barely looked at her. Standing with his arms crossed, he gave her nothing more than a cold stare that made it painfully clear he had no interest in hearing her out. Ignoring every warning, she walked closer and deliberately wrapped an arm around him, trying to recreate an intimacy that had been destroyed long ago. Yuchi's sweetness was nothing but a poorly acted performance. She insisted she wanted to make up for the past, but the greed shining in her eyes betrayed her true objective, the black card. The act was far too obvious. Having seen through her long ago, Lunyan didn't waste another second. The memory of her betrayal on their anniversary erased whatever patience he still had. With one firm shove, he pushed her out of the room. The silence that followed was soon interrupted by a calm, elegant voice. The mistress of Bojua Tower entered the room, observing the aftermath with an almost amused expression. She moved with the slow confidence of someone completely in control, the red folding fan in her hand serving as an extension of her quiet arrogance. Lunyan immediately tensed up. This conversation had never been meant for anyone else's ears. Left outside the room, Yuchi looked like she had lost every last shred of dignity. The hostess didn't even have to speak. A simple gesture of her hand was enough for the security guard to escort Yuchi away for good, removing her from their presence without another word. The peace didn't last long. The doors suddenly burst open as Chao stormed into the room, followed by a group of uniformed police officers. He carried himself with arrogant confidence, convinced this was finally his chance to turn everything around. The officers wasted no time explaining the situation. A formal report accusing Lunyan of financial fraud had been filed, and they were there to investigate the source of the fortune that had completely changed the balance of power inside the tower. The tension in the room was unmistakable. Remaining perfectly calm, Lunyan handed over the black card for inspection while everyone waited for the results. Beside him, Yuchi immediately latched onto Chao, already celebrating what she believed was about to be Lunyan's inevitable downfall. Instead, the result hit them like a bucket of ice water. The card passed every verification without a single issue and was officially validated by Madame Feng. Chao's entire scheme collapsed in an instant. Before leaving, one of the officers gave him a cold warning about the consequences of filing false police reports, making it clear that the next stunt would cost him dearly. The arrogance Chao had walked in with vanished completely, replaced by visible hesitation as he avoided everyone's gaze. Standing beside him, Yuchi looked at him with growing disgust, realizing for the first time that she had bet on the wrong person. Unable to control himself any longer, Chao exploded in childish rage, screaming at Lunyan, who simply watched him with amused indifference. Then, in a desperate attempt to get revenge, the blonde man suddenly pulled out a weapon. To Lunyan, it was nothing more than the perfect opportunity to test the durability of his new dragon robe. Before anyone else could react, the mistress of Bojua Tower flicked her fan through the air with flawless precision. Chow was blasted into the wall with terrifying force. She calmly stepped forward, her irritation now the only thing that mattered. Speaking with the authority of someone who tolerated no disorder, she silenced every possible protest with a single sentence. Chow slowly climbed back to his feet, but every trace of arrogance had disappeared. All that remained was pure fear as he faced the overwhelming gap in power between them. Yuchi dragged Chow out of the room while he continued shouting empty threats of revenge, desperately trying to salvage what little pride he had left. The hostess had no interest in watching any more of the pathetic display. She immediately threw them both out, and the heavy slam of the door restored silence to the hall. She then turned her attention toward Lunyan with an interest that clearly went beyond simple politeness. One question hung in the air. How did he intend to repay her for stepping in? Feeling cornered, Lunyan awkwardly suggested taking her to dinner, hoping it would be the safest and most diplomatic answer. She completely ignored the formality. Closing the distance between them with a teasing smile, she asked whether she looked too old for him, making the atmosphere almost unbearably tense. Standing that close felt like torture. Every breath she took made him even more uncomfortable, and his face flushed under the pressure. Lunyan desperately searched for an excuse to leave, but it was already too late. Before he could take more than a couple of steps, she pulled him back and kissed him. There was no romance behind it, only cold calculation. Without another word, she handed him a smartphone, casually mentioning that surviving in this world without a way to communicate would be difficult. Her tone was warm, almost affectionate. Smiling softly, she explained that the phone had already been fully set up with everything he would need, and that, as Chinky, she would help him stay connected to the network. Lunyan stared at the device in complete disbelief. He had never imagined seeing such familiar technology in this world. Laughing at his confusion, she explained that telepathy only worked over short distances, making the phone absolutely essential. When she offered to teach him how to use telepathy properly, it became clear her interest in him went far beyond simple kindness. Without warning, the atmosphere suddenly changed. A brilliant golden light flooded the room as a mysterious seal materialized. Chinky instinctively stepped back, shielding her eyes from its overwhelming brightness. In that instant, she understood the truth. He wasn't just another player, he was a being whose existence stretched back through ancient ages. Lunyan quietly stepped closer and slipped a ring onto her finger, doing everything he could to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. With genuine shyness, he thanked her and unexpectedly called her little sister. The words sounded so sincere that they shattered every social barrier between them, leaving Chinky completely speechless. The simple phrase awakened painful memories of Lunyan's own younger sister and the long years she had spent imprisoned. For a brief moment, Chinky wondered whether Lunyan might actually be connected to one of her enemies, but she quickly dismissed the thought with a gentle smile. Lunyan, however, suddenly froze. He realized that his innermost thoughts had been completely exposed, as though someone were reading an open book. Panic flooded his face before he could hide it. Chinky let out a quiet laugh and warned him that in worlds like this, even your inner thoughts had to be carefully controlled, because powerful beings could sense hidden intentions with frightening ease. Trying to ease the awkwardness, Lunyan unexpectedly offered her generous resources, leaving her visibly stunned. He pulled a book from inside his robes and handed it to her as a gift. She accepted it, but not before warning him that the road ahead would be filled with danger, and that extreme caution would be essential. Staying focused on what truly mattered, Lunyan seized the opportunity to ask about the whereabouts of his family, keeping their rescue as his highest priority. Chinky promised she would help, asking only for some time to contact the right people. After saying their goodbyes, Lunyan left, explaining that he needed to supervise an ongoing construction project. Chinky's moment of solitude didn't last long. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy as a new visitor arrived. A short, heavy-set man chewing on a cigar appeared in the doorway. Without bothering to hide his intentions, he walked in with a lustful stare. Dropping to one knee, he began piling treasures at her feet, convinced that his wealth could buy anything he wanted. Her response was immediate and brutal. Disgusted, she spat directly at him, making it crystal clear how little she thought of his boldness. But her expression soon wavered. A flash of suspicion crossed behind her glasses, as though she had sensed something dark lurking beneath his appearance. Pretending to care about her emotional state, the man offered her lotus seeds, treating the fearsome tower mistress like someone who simply needed to be calmed down. That was the final straw. With one sharp motion, she hurled her folding fan straight at his face. Pixie's high-pitched scream echoed through the hall as the entire room erupted into chaos. Chinky had completely run out of patience. With an authoritative gesture, she ordered Pixie to disappear, making it clear she was done with his pathetic act. Wasting no time, Lunyan quietly left the tower, adjusting his new robe as he stepped into the cool night breeze, leaving the chaos behind. The silence outside didn't last long. A loud shout echoed down the street, followed by hurried footsteps. A familiar voice called for him to stop. Lunyan hesitated. He already knew who it was, and the last thing he wanted was another headache. But pretending not to hear was becoming impossible. He finally stopped, took a deep breath, and realized running would only waste time. Pixie came rushing up behind him, fists clenched, and his face twisted with the bitterness of someone who had lost everything. Despite his sloppy appearance, the determination in his eyes was completely genuine. Lunyan instinctively prepared for an attack, but the overweight man did something completely unexpected. He grabbed both of Lunyan's hands. Every trace of aggression vanished from his face. With a voice full of desperation, he begged Lunyan to reveal the secret to winning the lady's heart, sounding so pitiful it was almost painful to watch. Lunyan tried to pull away, but the man's grip was surprisingly stubborn. Nearly in tears, Pixie played his final card. He revealed that he belonged to the powerful Heavenly Commerce Chamber and promised he could fulfill virtually any request. The name immediately caught Lunyan's attention. The chamber's influence was legendary, and ignoring a connection like that would have been incredibly foolish. Hiding his growing interest, Lunyan acted unimpressed, sarcastically asking what made a guy like Pixie so special that he could make promises like that. Pixie took the bait. In the blink of an eye, ancient scrolls, priceless elixirs, and glowing talismans rained down around them, filling the night with brilliant magical light. The overweight merchant smiled proudly as he saw the surprise in Lunyan's eyes. The display had worked. One after another, he began revealing treasures from his hidden inventory items that most people could only dream of ever seeing. Pixie enthusiastically explained every single treasure, promising unimaginable power, while Lunyan silently examined each one with careful calculation. Finally, Lunyan handed him a book with a very suggestive title, presenting it as the ultimate guide to winning any woman's heart. Pixie accepted it as though it were a priceless divine artifact, overflowing with gratitude. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lunyan quietly disappeared into the night before Pixie had the chance to open the book and realize the entire thing was actually nothing more than an elaborate joke. The peace didn't last. Scarlet eyes suddenly appeared throughout the dark forest as a pack of wolves silently surrounded the area. Recognizing the danger, Lunyan quickly drank the elixir he had just received and drew his sword. Though ancient, the blade began radiating intense heat, glowing as though it had been forged in the fires of hell itself. The moment the wolves attacked, the battle became a blur. Every swing of his sword carved blazing trails through the air, instantly reducing each predator to ashes. What had started as a terrifying ambush quickly turned into a one-sided slaughter. Lunyan fought with growing confidence, wearing a fearless grin. To him, the massacre was nothing more than a warm-up. The system suddenly interrupted the battle with a notification. He had leveled up. More importantly, he had finally unlocked access to the long-awaited class selection. The game had entered a completely new stage. After cutting down the last wolf, Lunyan collapsed to one knee, exhausted as the effects of both the elixir and the talisman still coursed through his body. Opening the system interface, he carefully reviewed the new class options. Realizing his current progression had reached a dead end, he decided there wasn't a second to waste. With a new objective firmly in mind, he headed toward the main hall, determined to find the answers he needed to master the next stage of his journey. To avoid any unnecessary delays, the system instantly teleported him into an enormous ceremonial hall. A receptionist greeted him with flawless professionalism and politely asked the reason for his visit. Lunyan explained his situation, but every attempt to advance through the normal process ran into strict restrictions. The system repeatedly informed him that he didn't meet the necessary requirements, and the receptionist, despite her polite attitude, confirmed there were absolutely no exceptions. Time was running out. Confused and unable to find a class that suited his situation, Lunyan decided to gamble on the only option he had left, seeking the hidden knowledge buried within the crypt. The moment he made his decision, a wave of energy surrounded him, completely rewriting the world around him. When the light faded, his body began to transform. His hair grew longer, and a mysterious seal appeared across his face, revealing his true identity once again. Sudahi was already waiting for him. The relief on her face was impossible to miss. She hurried over, immediately reaffirming her unwavering loyalty. But the emotion of their reunion was quickly overshadowed by the urgency of the situation. Noticing his uncertainty about choosing a class, she explained with complete confidence that his rare bloodline was the key to bypassing the system's restrictions. Her suggestion, however, was met with quiet murmurs of disapproval. The royal concubines didn't see helping their monarch as an honor. They saw it as a burden, Having spent centuries managing the kingdom during the king's long exile, they had grown accustomed to holding the real authority. As they escorted Lunyan through a maze of winding corridors, their subtle remarks and suspicious glances made one thing perfectly clear. The power he thought he possessed wasn't nearly as absolute as he had believed. Their final destination held an unexpected surprise, an enormous bed surrounded by an atmosphere filled with restorative energy. Dee began explaining the effects of the place, promising perfect spiritual balance, but the way she described it left Lunyan visibly flustered, unable to understand exactly where the conversation was going. Still, the idea quickly started to make sense. It sounded far more appealing than exhausting physical training or relying on questionable substances, and the young women carefully explained the cultivation technique they had developed, determined to make sure everything succeeded. Their goal was simple: purify and strengthen his internal energy channels so he could finally absorb the world's essence with complete ease. The instant the process began, an unfamiliar energy flowed through his body as though the bed itself were alive. He had never experienced anything like it. Amazed by how effective the technique was, he praised their efforts as warmth and vitality surged through his body, unable to hide his surprise at how quickly the results appeared. Da smiled and explained the source of the phenomenon. Strange as the explanation sounded, there was no denying how effective that energy source was. Within moments, the system began flooding him with notifications, confirming dramatic increases across all of his attributes and the complete activation of his 3 perception channels. Da explained that this feeling of completeness was only the beginning. Then her expression turned serious as she warned him that his growth was far from over. Gesturing toward the hallway, she signaled for someone else to enter. The newcomer walked in with a reserved posture, but the excitement shining in her eyes was impossible to miss. Her unusual horns gave her an exotic and unforgettable appearance. Da introduced the young woman as one of her finest students, praising both her dedication and the importance of the task she had been entrusted with. The moment Lunyan and the horned girl's eyes met, hesitation slowly gave way to mutual anticipation. But the moment was abruptly interrupted by the shrill ringtone of his phone. The voice on the other end wasted no time. His cousin had been spotted near a lake overrun by deadly creatures. There wasn't a second to lose. The horned young woman lowered her eyes, unable to hide the disappointment brought on by their sudden interruption. Offering her a gentle smile, Lunyan lightly placed a hand on her shoulder to reassure her before turning his full attention back to his mission of rescuing his family. The scene shifted to a lake whose dark waters reflected a blood-red sunset. The endless roar of a nearby waterfall carried an ancient, overwhelming presence, but the peaceful scenery was shattered by the violence unfolding along the shore. Chao stood there overseeing a merciless beating, demanding that a young player reveal the location of a treasure he didn't even have. The bruises covering the victim's body made it obvious this wasn't an interrogation, it was pure torture. Through sobs, the young man pleaded that he was just an ordinary player, but his explanation, combined with his fish-like avatar, only made his attackers even crueler. Watching from the shadows, Lunyan felt a chill run down his spine as familiar features caught his eye. The realization froze him in place. Slowly, he raised a trembling hand, trying to confirm what his eyes refused to believe. The prisoner suddenly noticed him, and the moment recognition flashed across his face, his despair turned into hope. He sprinted toward Lunyan and threw his arms around him, hugging him like someone who had finally escaped hell itself, unable to hide his overwhelming relief. The young man was overcome with joy, as though this reunion had finally completed a missing piece of the puzzle. While Chao and his gang laughed in the distance, already looking for their next victims, Lunyan helped his cousin back to his feet. Right now, there was only one thing that mattered: family. Still trapped inside his strange fish-like appearance, his cousin finally explained everything. After leveling up and choosing a subclass, the system had punished him with a humiliating transformation, turning him into a low-level lake monster. Fighting back tears, he described the nightmare he'd been living through, trapped inside the lake by a barrier of monstrous worms while being beaten day after day. Suddenly, his expression changed completely. His eyes widened in absolute terror as they locked onto something behind Lunyan. His face turned pale, and he screamed for them to run. The warning came too late. The lake began spinning into a violent whirlpool. The ground trembled beneath a deep, muffled roar that made the air feel heavy and freezing cold. Then, from the depths, a colossal 9-headed worm erupted from the water, its massive jaws opening wide like something straight out of a nightmare. Unfortunately for the monster, the crowd didn't run away. Instead, the players lining the shore became wildly excited. To them, this wasn't a deadly threat, it was the perfect chance to test their brand new weapons and artifacts. Greed lit up every pair of eyes. Lunyan, however, remained tense. His instincts screamed that this creature didn't follow the normal rules of the game. Its powers felt chaotic, brutal, and completely forbidden. It only took him a second to connect the dots. That creature was tied to Sheng Gongbao. The blood drained from his face as he realized the danger was far greater than anyone else could imagine. Meanwhile, the other players charged in with reckless confidence, driven by arrogance that bordered on stupidity. From Lunyan's perspective, they looked like fools marching straight toward slaughter. The monster calmly watched the approaching crowd as if it were choosing the finest cut of meat. Without making a single physical attack, it unleashed a deafening roar accompanied by a devastating wave of pure energy. The entire crowd was blown away like leaves in a storm. Yuchi slammed into a boulder with brutal force, staring in horror at the creature's disturbingly human face. Unable to process what she was seeing, one enormous claw slowly stretched forward. The message couldn't have been clearer. No one was leaving alive. Its glowing violet eyes radiated an overwhelming supernatural presence as the monster revealed who it truly was, the prince consort who had lurked in the shadows for centuries. His voice thundered across the battlefield as he dismissed humanity as nothing more than livestock. Without hesitation, he began draining the life force from Chao's followers. The sight was horrifying. Their bodies withered before everyone's eyes, the life vanished from their faces, and all that remained were empty shells, mindless husks, transformed into nothing more than fuel for the beast's feast. The massacre had only just begun. Without wasting another second, the monster unleashed the next stage of its nightmare. Its minions immediately obeyed, forcing the surviving players toward the center of the ruins. As their master finished absorbing his victims, the silence over the lake was shattered by a violent explosion of water. Hideous monsters burst out from the darkness beneath the surface, surrounding everyone who was still alive. Without hesitation, Lunyan drew his talismans. The supplies Pixie had given him had arrived at exactly the right moment. He leaped into battle, activating multiple talismans at once. Blazing flames mixed with violent bolts of lightning, creating a devastating explosion of elemental power. The monsters, once fast and relentless, immediately collapsed, electrocuted, and completely disoriented. Channeling every ounce of strength he had, Lunyan unleashed a massive shockwave that tore through everything in its path. Many of the creatures were reduced to ashes before they even hit the ground. Amid the chaos of battle, he exchanged a quick glance with his cousin. That was the signal. His cousin immediately put on the most exaggerated fake fight imaginable, wildly flailing his arms in every direction as though he were locked in an intense battle that fooled absolutely no one. Shouting that he had everything under control, he created the perfect distraction, allowing Lunyan to quietly set the real plan into motion. Nearby, Yuchi was losing her patience, screaming as she fought off the smaller creatures blocking her path. Breathing heavily, with her feet tangled around her own weapon, she struggled against pure exhaustion. Meanwhile, Chao kept his composure. He ignored the chaos around him, focusing entirely on his real objective, lining up the cannon. The moment it finally fired, its overwhelming firepower changed the course of the battle. The weapon was massive and anything but subtle, requiring raw strength just to operate, but it gave ordinary fighters the edge they desperately needed against enemies far stronger than themselves. Chao wrestled with its weight, his grip nearly slipping as his whole body strained under the effort. Even so, he refused to give up. He locked onto his target and pulled the trigger. The blast punched straight through the creature. A massive hole opened in the monster's chest, releasing a burst of golden light that swept across the battlefield and reignited everyone's hope. The empty space where its demonic heart should have been seen to prove the monster had finally been defeated. For one brief moment, the air itself felt lighter, as if victory was finally within reach. Relief quickly turned into celebration. Everyone crowded around Chao, showering him with praise. Completely exhausted, Yuchi collapsed to the ground. Only Lunyan stayed apart from the group, moving with calm, surgical precision, as if nothing else around him mattered, keeping his attention fixed solely on surviving. But the celebration didn't last. The monster was still standing. It loomed directly over Chao. Far from being defeated, the attack had only awakened its true power. Now burning with rage, its glowing eyes locked onto the one who had fired the shot. Being wounded by an ordinary human was an insult it refused to forgive. The group's confidence vanished instantly, replaced by paralyzing fear. The monster's enormous shadow swallowed Chao as the atmosphere grew unbearably heavy. It slowly stepped forward, dark magic swirling around its body while extending both arms, preparing to deliver a killing blow. Then something even stranger happened. The spell twisted reality itself. The blonde young man suddenly disappeared, replaced by a terrified young girl who barely recognized her own reflection. The entire group froze in confusion, unable to understand how such an impossible transformation had happened. The prince simply watched with a satisfied smile. He praised his followers and casually suggested they take a break, treating the battle as though it had been nothing more than a game that had finally reached its conclusion. The monsters immediately obeyed, grinning with unsettling childlike smiles. Still frozen in shock, Chao never even had time to react. While despair consumed everyone else, Lunyan and his cousin kept acting as though they were still following their original plan, barely noticing that the battlefield had become a complete nightmare. Boyarba's attempt to hide in the darkness failed miserably. The prince spotted him immediately and let out a piercing scream that echoed across the entire battlefield, silencing everything for a single terrifying moment. There was nowhere left to hide. The demon's reaction was immediate. It lunged forward, and the pressure in the air skyrocketed as its furious roar exploded across the battlefield, making it painfully clear that death was only moments away. Lunyan staggered as the overwhelming wave of power crashed through the area. The prince's strength was beyond anything he had imagined, capable of tearing the battlefield apart without even taking a single step. The ground split open beneath them while the serpents surrounding him hissed violently, making the nightmare even worse. The only reason Chao wasn't ripped apart on the spot was the dragon robe he had obtained by pure luck. Even then, the impact was devastating. His body was hurled into the rocks, leaving him barely alive. While the monsters laughed, Lunyan stayed calm, secretly using the icy jade incense burner to restore his energy. He forced himself to recover, determined to face the entire army without revealing who he truly was. When the creatures began dragging him toward the water to drown him once and for all, he refused to give up. He grabbed his cousin's hand and tried activating the golden seal, hoping for an emergency teleport. It was a fatal miscalculation. The nine-headed demon simply smiled, revealing that he had known exactly what Lunyan was trying to do. Without warning, countless serpents emerged from thin air, wrapping tightly around his arms and locking every movement. An error message flashed across the system interface. Escape route blocked. Even the lesser monsters panicked once Lunyan's true identity became clear. The greed in their eyes replaced their usual bloodlust. To them, his flesh promised immortality. The giant shark monster stepped in, smashing one of its own greedy subordinates aside to re-establish the chain of command. The grotesque army of human-beast hybrids drooled with anticipation. They didn't just want to kill Lunyan, they wanted to consume the reincarnation energy of King Sho flowing through his veins, a delicacy powerful enough to elevate their miserable existences into something far greater. The monsters themselves finally revealed the horrifying truth behind their torture chamber, grinning with twisted delight. This wasn't a simulation. It was real. Lunyan ignored the scenery completely, frantically searching through his inventory, calculating how to use every remaining artifact in one last desperate attempt to survive. Behind the enemy prince, 3 dark portals slowly rotated. He mocked Lunyan's determination, warning that struggling would only make his death more painful. Without another word, the demon unleashed a blast of pure energy infused with darkness and an icy blue light. Lunyan instantly realized the attack was impossible to survive, but before it could reach him, his cousin stepped in front of him. Without hesitation, he became a human shield. The explosion tore straight through him. The damage was immediate, fatal. A massive wound pierced his chest, leaving absolutely no hope of survival. Even as he lay dying, he turned toward Lunyan with a faint smile, thanking him for all the years they had shared together, treating his sacrifice as though it were nothing more than a small favor. The sight shattered Lunyan. The emotional pain overwhelmed every physical wound as tears mixed with blood running down his face. Memories flooded back all at once, from childhood games to impossible battles they had survived together. Now, the lifeless body of the person who had always stood beside him was being treated like worthless trash by a monster that viewed humans as nothing more than disposable prey. The creature sneered at Lunyan, calmly informing him that he would be next. There was no escape, but instead of surrendering, a spark of stubborn determination ignited in Lunyan's eyes. He had no intention of giving up, not even in the face of death. His defiance enraged the 9-headed demon, who saw it as nothing more than pathetic arrogance. Without saying a word, Lunyan pulled out a stack of talismans and hurled them toward his enemy. The demon barely reacted. To him, the attack felt no more threatening than a gentle breeze or a handful of dry leaves drifting across his face. Lunyan's desperate resistance seemed completely meaningless. With a dismissive wave of his hand, the demon scattered every talisman. Just another cheap magic trick, but Lunyan wasn't finished. He immediately activated the wind bracelet, launching it with overwhelming force before chaining it together with the power of the triple violet brooch. For a split second, something changed. The enemy's overwhelming pressure faltered ever so slightly. Driven by pure rage, Lunyan unleashed artifact after artifact in a relentless barrage. He had no guarantee any of it would work, but he kept attacking on instinct alone, flooding the battlefield with one priceless treasure after another. The absurd display left everyone watching completely speechless. Some thought he had gone insane. Others desperately prayed that each explosion might somehow become their salvation. The prince smiled mockingly at Lunyan. "Do you really think toys like these can hurt me?" Lunyan was terrified, but his determination outweighed every instinct telling him to run. He charged forward as though surrendering would be a fate even worse than death itself. The countless serpents making up the demon's body instantly broke away, intercepting his advance and surrounding him from every direction. Every attack was blocked. Every strike was predicted. The demon countered everything with effortless precision. Then, something unexpected happened. A flash of pain crossed the prince's face. His body suddenly stiffened, frozen by a mysterious paralysis that completely shattered his aura of invincibility. That single moment of hesitation was all Lunyan needed. He seized the opening without a second thought, raising his blade and charging forward with renewed determination, swinging as though there would never be another chance. Lun's confidence spread across the battlefield, and the crowd, once frozen in fear, now watched with a spark of hope in their eyes. The demon, who had always ruled with absolute dominance, looked genuinely confused for the first time as his predictions started falling apart. Furious over the unexpected resistance, the monster struck back with a blast of blue energy. The impact was devastating. Lun was hurled across the battlefield, crashing into the ground so hard that he nearly lost all of his life force. The only reason he didn't collapse was because he planted his sword into the ground and used it to keep himself standing. Seeing how weakened his opponent looked, the demon expanded his body into a colossal mass that blotted out the sky, casting an overwhelming shadow over everyone below. With a lazy smirk, he mocked Lun, claiming that not even the king himself could leave so much as a scratch on him, emphasizing the enormous gap between their power. Trembling and completely exhausted, Lun let out a deep breath. The fear was real, but he refused to fall. He held on to his very last ounce of strength just to keep fighting. Lun tightened his grip on the sword and straightened his posture, ignoring the pain and exhaustion. He stood as if he were facing an ordinary training session instead of an unavoidable massacre. A strange glow, like burning embers, appeared in his eyes. His determination was absolute. Sensing the shift in the human's aura, the demon hesitated for the first time, overcome by a deep, instinctive sense of unease. At last, Lun unleashed the imperial energy he had been saving as his final trump card. In one lightning-fast motion, he drove his blade straight through the creature's body. The strike was flawless. His slash split the monster apart and severed its head from its body in one swift, lethal attack. Meanwhile, deep within the abyss, the supreme ruler of the demonic hierarchy lounged on his throne in boredom when he suddenly sensed a disturbance. An intense crimson light flooded the chamber. Shen slowly rose to his feet, his interest instantly renewed. The king had finally revealed his true essence. Back at the lake, everyone celebrated, convinced they had finally won. But the surviving monsters only laughed quietly, as if they knew a terrifying secret. Humanity's hope lasted only a few seconds. From the demon's headless body, serpents began slithering out of its shoulders, twisting and writhing as if they had lives of their own. The regeneration was immediate and horrifying. Every wound sealed shut, its dormant energy surged back to life, and the monster rebuilt itself before everyone's eyes, even larger and more imposing than before. The mocking grin on the demon's face as he watched the shock on Lun's expression made one thing painfully clear. His greatest effort had been meaningless, and the nightmare was only beginning. Lun immediately understood the trick. The monster had sacrificed one of its heads to restore itself. An already hopeless situation became even more impossible. The demon's fury was now overwhelming. Having nearly been killed wounded its pride, turning it into an unstoppable thirst for revenge. With no more tricks left and every defense exhausted, Lun didn't retreat. He simply closed his eyes, accepting the final blow as inevitable. But the attack never came. The sky was suddenly torn open by a blinding golden light. It wasn't luck, it felt like fate itself had intervened. A majestic voice echoed across the battlefield, forbidding anyone from laying a hand on the king. From the radiant light emerged dragons made of pure gold. Their presence was so overwhelming and majestic that even the demon faltered. Before it could react, one of the dragons lunged forward with terrifying ferocity. In the blink of an eye, it tore the monster's head clean off. This time, there was no regeneration. The demon's life force vanished instantly, erasing its existence completely. The system erupted with non-stop notifications. Victory confirmed. As a reward for defeating such a powerful entity, Lun obtained an enormous deep purple pearl unlike anything he had ever seen. The moment it landed in his hands, his level skyrocketed. Forged from the essence of a high-ranking demon, the artifact possessed the power to evolve any magical item to an entirely new level. As the golden radiance still lingered across the battlefield, a lone figure slowly descended from the heavens. A horse galloped through empty space, completely ignoring gravity. Its rider carried an artifact of absolute power and didn't need to say a single word to prove that the tide of the war had completely turned. Among those descending stood Wen Chong, the legendary guardian of the dynasty. Though age weighed heavily upon him, he maintained flawless composure as he approached, knelt before Lun, apologized for arriving late, and admitted that he had never imagined he would live long enough to see his emperor again. As the scene unfolded, the sky came alive. Golden bolts of lightning rained down upon the remaining monsters, obliterating them within seconds. Every warrior descending from the heavens left behind a trail of light and destruction. One of them was the young swordsman, Jian Gufan, famous as the warrior who had taken his own life after suffering a humiliating defeat. Without hesitation, he knelt in absolute submission. Right behind him came another veteran, a towering district guard, whose body was covered in the scars of countless battles. Lun recognized the man immediately. He was the loyal soldier who had remained by his wife's side until her very last breath. Exhaustion finally caught up with the young emperor, allowing him to relax for the first time. The unwavering loyalty of those men, untouched by time, had been his only salvation. With a calm gesture, he asked the three of them to stand, dismissing the formal ceremony. But the moment of peace didn't last long. A faint whisper came from behind him, and when he turned around, he found his cousin, who looked. His body was limp, barely clinging to life, and his lips could hardly form any words. Panic gripped Lun as he shouted for someone to save his cousin at any cost. Jian Gufan reacted instantly. With swift, precise movements, he placed a green pill into the young man's mouth. As he supported him in his arms, he calmly explained that the medicine would purge the evil essence from his body and restore his original form. Within moments, his cousin was freed from the grotesque transformation. He stared at his own hands in disbelief, shocked that he was still alive. Lun bowed in gratitude, but the general brushed it off, treating the rescue as nothing more than his duty. The Thunder General then voiced his frustration with the Celestial Court, complaining about the chains that bound him to its service. Jian Kuai echoed those feelings, admitting that he had spent years waiting for Lun to reclaim the throne so they could finally be freed from that burden. Lun promised to speed up his rise, but the elder stopped him, warning that rushing a path that demanded patience and maturity would only bring disaster. Their conversation quickly shifted when Jian asked what should be done about the human witnesses. Without emotion, he suggested killing Chao and Yuchi immediately, arguing that leaving survivors alive would only create future problems. Terrified, Chao and Yuchi begged for mercy, appealing to the humanity they still believed Lun possessed. He quietly considered the situation. Realizing that killing them would only create unnecessary complications, he rejected the idea of execution. Instead, he chose a far more strategic solution. He would erase every memory they had of what had happened. The three subordinates exchanged approving glances. Satisfied smiles spread across their faces before they bowed once more, accepting their ruler's decision as proof of his growing wisdom and self-control. The Thunder General focused his power, carefully opening his third eye with incredible precision so the technique wouldn't harm anyone else. Gentle waves of energy flowed from his forehead, washing over the survivors and instantly forcing them into unconsciousness. One by one, they collapsed as though they had suddenly fallen asleep, protected beneath a soft golden light. The system confirmed the result. Every memory of the lake had been completely erased without leaving a single trace. The mission was finally complete. The Guardians mounted their majestic dragon-like beasts and gave Lun one final bow before soaring into the heavens. Lun and his cousin watched their silhouettes disappear beyond the horizon. With a light punch on his cousin's shoulder, Lun suggested it was time for him to return to the village and move on, while he still had unfinished business to take care of. Meanwhile, peace in the demon realm came to a violent end. Inside a distant chamber, the life plaque connected to the nine-headed monster suddenly split in half with a sharp crack. The sound echoed like a warning of disaster. Huang Shen, the Dragon King's daughter and the creature's partner, was consumed by uncontrollable fury. She realized the hunt for Lun had only just begun. The moment she learned of her husband's death, Huang Shen wasted no time grieving. Blinded by rage, her face flushed red as she clenched her fists and swore to leave the kingdom to hunt down his killer herself. No one would kill her ally and escape alive. Back on the battlefield, Lun looked at the unconscious soldiers and regretted not warning his followers about Sheng Wambo's intervention, but there was no time to dwell on it. He disabled the remaining security measures and left. When Lun arrived at the palace, he let out a relieved sigh, wanting nothing more than peace after everything that had happened. 3 young women greeted him with respectful bows, but he immediately noticed that one of them was missing. When he asked about Suji, they explained that she was focused on creating an elixir to enhance hearing. Accepting the explanation, Lun turned his attention to his newest companion, the young woman dressed in cow-themed clothing, and invited her to continue their training. She immediately agreed and followed him into another chamber. The time they spent training proved incredibly productive. The system continuously displayed achievement notifications, confirming that his chosen recovery method had been a complete success. Lun noticed obvious improvements in her, while he himself felt his senses becoming sharper than ever before. Soon afterward, Suji entered the room wearing a gentle smile, almost as if she had expected to find him in perfect condition. Lun welcomed her with a grateful pat on the head, acknowledging that her guidance through the 9 channels technique had been the key to his success. Her help had been the reason he survived the battle. The palace's peaceful atmosphere was interrupted by the arrival of another visitor, a short young woman with short, bluish hair who seemed to carry the chill of an eternal winter mist wherever she went. A glowing snowflake rested in her hair as though it were alive. Introducing herself as Shuning, she respectfully wished prosperity upon the king. Curious, Lun looked toward Suji, who quickly explained that the young woman came from the Eastern Sea. Her blood possessed unique properties that allowed for incredibly precise transportation techniques, exactly what Lun needed next. Lun felt a slight sense of discomfort as he processed what needed to be extracted, with some unusual thoughts crossing his mind. Sensing his hesitation, Suji handed him a razor-sharp sword and a jade container for the collection, making it clear there was no time for second thoughts. The situation felt strange, cold. The jade container, now almost translucent beneath the light, glowed with a mesmerizing blue hue. Even after seeing countless rare treasures, Lun couldn't take his eyes off its mysterious beauty. When the procedure was finally over, Lun sat beside her and carefully began the infusion, allowing the precious blood to flow into his body and fully merge with his own power. Lun's precision was flawless. Every single drop seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As the blood was absorbed, a soft light filled the room, and the atmosphere grew heavy with an ancient energy. Lun's consciousness was suddenly pulled into a deep trance where the chaos of the outside world faded into perfect harmony. For the first time in a long while, he felt completely at peace. The system immediately confirmed that his new ability had been successfully activated, proving the experiment had been a complete success. Unable to hide his excitement, Lun eagerly asked what the next stage would be. Keeping everything under control, Suji led him deeper into the women's chambers. As he walked, Lun couldn't stop wondering how his enhanced senses, especially his sense of smell, would change the way he experienced the world. One of the young women handed him an unusual-looking fruit and instructed him to focus entirely on his nose, since all of his other sensory channels had already been fully stabilized. He followed her instructions without hesitation. The fruit's aroma was intoxicating, instantly transporting his mind to a distant shoreline where he could almost feel the ocean breeze against his skin. The trance was suddenly interrupted when an invisible force lifted his body into the air, spinning him beneath the ceiling like a top. His dizziness lasted only a moment before a blinding flash erupted throughout the room. At the center of the explosion of energy stood Lun himself, who had just perfectly mastered the final stage of his olfactory training. Mastering the 9 channels pushed Lun's power ceiling to an entirely new level. Excitement surged through him. Reaching the top of the hierarchy no longer felt like an impossible dream, it now seemed like an inevitable destiny. Filled with genuine admiration, the young women knelt together to celebrate their master's breakthrough. Overflowing with confidence, Lun promised that he would soon free them from the crypt, assuring them that nothing would stand in their way. The celebration didn't last long. A new system notification interrupted the moment with an urgent mission. The winner would receive an ice crystal, a rare pearl, and black meteorite iron. The gleam in one of the girl's eyes as she read the reward list revealed just how valuable those materials were. They were the exact components needed to restore the legendary dragon sword. Without wasting another second, Lun set off for the Waning Gorge. The place was a living nightmare, illuminated by the crimson glow of a blood-red moon that revealed piles of forgotten bones beneath towering cliffs. It was a land of death where no living soul dared to set foot, Meanwhile, Huang Shen's rage knew no bounds. She had pressured the demon lord to reveal who had killed her husband, and the story she received only fueled her hatred. Wearing a carefully crafted expression of sympathy, the demon claimed that King Shou and General Huang Chong had conspired together, abusing their power to destroy the Guardian. The news hit Huang Shen like a blade. Her face twisted into a mask of grief and pure hatred as she struggled to process her loss. But the demon wasn't finished with his story yet. The revelation that the people responsible for her husband's death were still alive changed everything. Huang Shen refused to believe that the player's erased memories were an impossible obstacle. Shen noticed the opening and, with calculated cunning, offered her the chance to face the Emperor personally during the next day's trial. Then he played his final card. He promised her eternal beauty, a gift bestowed by Lord Tong Tian himself. Huang Shen left the hall laughing, already savoring the taste of revenge and the power that would soon be hers. She was nothing more than a piece on Shen's chessboard, sent out as bait while he negotiated with the demons of Mean. Completely unaware of the manipulation, Huang Shen took position inside the withering gorge, hiding among the jagged rocks. With unwavering focus, she disguised herself as an ordinary player, blending into the crowd while quietly reading the thoughts of those around her, searching for any trace of her husband's killer. Lun was there as well. He kept the imperial seal hidden, knowing that drawing unwanted attention in the past had cost him dearly. This time, the Emperor moved carefully, doing his best to look like just another player. Needing supplies without raising suspicion, he pulled out his phone and called the only person who could provide rare items without asking questions, Pixie. Pixie answered immediately, overflowing with the enthusiasm of someone who never lets a sale slip away. Within seconds, a holographic catalog floated in front of Lun. The merchant wasted no time, enthusiastically pitching the latest additions to his inventory. Knowing his current level wasn't enough to guarantee success, Lun browsed the selection with laser focus. In the end, he purchased 50 high-grade talismans. Pixie confirmed the order instantly and guaranteed express delivery. The payment was effortless. Lun casually used Mrs. Feng's black card as if it were nothing more than a scrap of paper. Moments later, a winged pig flew overhead, landed with the package, and waited eagerly for a good review. Lun inspected the shipment and smiled. The quality was flawless. Before hanging up, Pixie casually asked if Lun happened to have any books on persuasion or communication, hoping to improve his own salesmanship. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by an icy presence. A woman dressed in white silently appeared behind Lun like a ghost. Her voice was cold and stern as she demanded to know who he had been speaking with so casually. Lun quickly ended the call and, without missing a beat, improvised a story about his ongoing search for his missing father. Two more women stepped out behind her. Jisoo had a gentle appearance, while Jum carried herself with a confident gaze that seemed capable of seeing through any lie. Acting as the mediator, Feng introduced everyone, completely ignoring the tension in the air. The newcomers' reactions to hearing about a possible alliance, and even rumors of a marriage, were immediate. Their smiles disappeared, replaced by icy expressions and remarks dripping with contempt. They had no interest in empty formalities, and the invitation to join forces was met with sharp sarcasm, making it obvious they wouldn't be manipulated so easily. Sensing the atmosphere growing heavier, Lun stayed composed and tried to break the ice by greeting Feng, but the response was just as cold. Jisoo looked him over from head to toe with a critical eye before dismissing him outright. In her opinion, his level was laughable, and without a proper subclass, he would only slow everyone down. Standing beside her, Jum Chiao wasted no time piling on, mocking his reliance on items and talismans instead of cultivating his own strength. According to her, that shortcut would only lead to an early grave. Lun felt his face heat up, but he swallowed the insult. Arguing with them would accomplish nothing. The tense silence was broken by a smooth, captivating voice. It was the demon princess, Huang Shen, arriving with an angelic smile as though rejecting her alliance had never been an option. Her kind facade was flawless, but something sinister lurked behind her eyes. Kier, impressed by what appeared to be an incredibly talented ice mage, immediately changed her attitude. She warmly welcomed the newcomer and promised everyone an equal share of the rewards. While everyone else lowered their guard, Huang Shen continued playing her game. She stepped close to Lun and casually asked about the living lake. Instantly, every warning bell went off in Lun's mind. His eyes ignited with a fiery glow capable of piercing illusions, and the princess's disguise crumbled before him, revealing the monstrous being she truly was. Instead of exposing her, Lun decided to play along. Calmly, he pretended to know nothing about the place. Knowing she could read minds, he deliberately filled his thoughts with chaotic images, absurd situations, and awkward nonsense, turning his own mind into a minefield that prevented her from uncovering anything useful. Lun's mental counterattack hit its mark. Huang Shen abruptly stepped back, muttering a curse beneath her breath while Lun maintained a perfectly confused expression. The princess's frustration was obvious. She was losing control, misreading the situation as an insult toward the group. Chier immediately defended their ally, confronting Lun aggressively. Wanting to avoid a fight before the mission had even begun, Lun quickly redirected everyone's attention back to the objective, easing the tension. When it was finally time to depart, Huang Shen insisted on joining the party, claiming they couldn't possibly succeed without a mage. Although she acted humble on the outside, her heart was filled with venom. The humiliation she had just endured only strengthened her resolve to wipe out the entire group the moment the perfect opportunity presented itself. The entrance to the gorge was packed. Players were testing their gear or chatting casually, completely unaware of the danger waiting ahead. The noise vanished the moment Jian Gufan appeared, carrying a sinister stake and solemnly announcing the start of the trial. The entire crowd froze. The general's presence was overwhelming, his flawless features looking as though they had been carved from stone, drawing both admiration and fear. Yet Gufan himself felt anything but triumphant. The object in his hands was a bitter reminder of a past he wished he could forget. The tension reached its breaking point when he mentioned the shortage of resources. Survival instincts immediately took over, and the crowd broke formation, charging recklessly into the gorge without a second thought. Excitement filled the air, but Gufan never let his guard down. His eyes swept across the crowd until they locked onto one particular figure. There, hidden among the players, stood his emperor beside someone he didn't trust. Something about the situation felt wrong, a flaw in the entire setup that instantly put him on alert. Focusing his senses, Gufan detected a distorted aura, something carefully concealed with incredible precision. Before he could investigate further, a mocking voice cut through the air, openly challenging him. Standing before him was Hanyan Shin. His youthful appearance fooled no one. Gufan knew exactly how dangerous he really was. Memories came rushing back, and without caring about the consequences, the general lunged forward, determined to settle a score that had remained unfinished for centuries. His rival answered with an icy laugh, throwing sharp insults that only fueled Gufan's anger. A fight was about to erupt when a commanding voice echoed across the battlefield, stopping both men in their tracks. The third prince stepped between them like an unbreakable wall. Completely calm, he reminded them that those meaningless grudges had been buried by time centuries ago. Neither of them dared argue. Under the prince's unquestionable authority, they both lowered their weapons. As the tension settled, Gufan dropped a bombshell. A demon had crossed through the passage. The prince showed no surprise. He calmly confirmed that he already knew how serious the situation was. After ordering everyone to stay at their posts, he shot into the sky, leaving a crimson streak across the heavens. Meanwhile, Lun's group continued through the gorge in an unsettling silence that felt even more intimidating than any battle cry. Kier was the first to notice something strange. The area was far too empty compared to the crowded entrance, immediately setting off alarm bells. Remaining calm, Lun explained that the trial randomly separated every team, sending each group on a different route. Confident in what he knew from the legends of Dai, he reminded everyone that only those who reached the final boss would earn true glory. He briefly glanced toward Huang Shen while carefully keeping his distance, making sure not to reveal his intentions. His plan was to slow the group's pace near the entrance, giving Gufan enough time to notice the suspicious aura. Without that, any warning would be pointless. Even though Lun believed he was stronger than the average player, he knew fighting the demons head-on would be suicide. Activating his fiery vision, he scanned the cave and confirmed that only low-level enemies lay ahead, easy targets for the group. While the girls discussed their strategy, planning around the newcomer's ice abilities, the atmosphere grew heavier. Wangan maintained a calm expression, but inside he was already planning a massacre, calculating how to eliminate everyone at once. Sword in hand, Qi warned that the enemy had arrived. At that very moment, thick fog swallowed the cavern. Shadowy soldiers clad in ancient armor slowly emerged from the mist, advancing with terrifying slowness. Feng charged immediately, wielding her sword as though it were an extension of her own body. The rest of the group opened fire with heavy weapons, filling the cave with explosions that tore through the enemy ranks. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were literal ghosts. Huang Shen, however, showed no concern whatsoever. With frightening ease, she casually waved her hand, freezing entire rows of enemies into solid ice. leaving them ready to be shattered by everyone else's attacks. Just as victory seemed certain, Lun decided to join the fight. Without any urgency, he pulled out several bottles, tossed them into the horde, and calmly announced that they contained a special medicine for dealing with spirits. The result was catastrophic. Instead of destroying the ghosts, the number of enemies multiplied, turning the battlefield into complete chaos. It looked as though he had intentionally poured gasoline onto a fire. The girls exploded in anger, yelling that he had mixed up the items and ruined the entire battle. The chaos reached its peak when Huang Shen stepped forward. She unleashed a devastating wave of freezing energy, wiping out every enemy in her path. Completely captivated, the others rushed over to surround her, praising their savior, without realizing she was simply following her own hidden agenda. While the girls showered Huang Shen with praise, all the blame fell on Lun. Instead of gratitude, he was met with a barrage of insults and even a few kicks. Seeing things spiral out of control, Seer stepped in and pulled him away from the crowd. She dragged him into a corner, pinned him against the wall, and unleashed every ounce of her frustration in a fierce scolding. Seer demanded that Lun pay closer attention to his next moves. The rest of the group had no interest in hearing the lecture. They had already gathered around Huang Shen, treating her as their true leader while completely ignoring him. Wasting no time on further arguments, they pushed deeper into the gorge, leaving the dispute behind. Their brief moment of peace didn't last long. A massive spider with disturbingly human facial features emerged to greet them, and one glance was enough to tell everyone they were in serious danger. The creature moved like a born predator. Its stinger shot forward in a lightning-fast strike, trapping the entire team at once. Thick strands of webbing appeared out of nowhere, wrapping around their weapons with surgical precision. Within seconds, swords, spears, and pistols were ripped from their hands, leaving everyone completely defenseless. Realizing how bad things had become, Lun wasted no time and unleashed his fire talismans. Crimson bolts slammed into the spider, but it didn't even flinch. It dismissed the attack as though it were nothing more than a child's game. Its webbing tightened around everyone except Huang Shen, pinning them down in a suffocating grip. Trapped in such a humiliating position, and pressed tightly against Lun, the girls fumed with frustration. Then Wangan jumped back into the fight. With one powerful motion, she hurled a glowing purple sword straight at the monster. The impact was devastating. The spider collapsed lifelessly to the ground. The moment everyone broke free, the girls immediately went back to praising Huang Shen, completely ignoring the danger they had just survived. The system confirmed their victory, and the path to the boss opened. Kier rushed toward the glowing portal, blinded by excitement, but Lun grabbed her by the arm before she could step through. Lun quickly stepped in front of her, firmly holding her back. He used his own body as a shield, because the energy pouring from the portal ahead was undeniably dangerous. Huang Shen's expression instantly changed. A predatory gleam flashed across her eyes, and a cynical smile spread across her face, making it obvious the path ahead was a trap. Ignoring the hostility coming from Kier's group, Lun focused on one thing only, keeping them alive. Speaking urgently, he got straight to the point. They weren't dealing with an ordinary player, they were facing a demon. If they fell into its hands, there would be no escape. Hidden beneath her disguise, the princess simply laughed mockingly, amused that he had uncovered the truth. She began weaving dark magic, filling the air with a dense black mist. The atmosphere grew unbearably heavy. Everyone's knees buckled as the cave itself. The red-haired girl turned completely pale as she grasped the seriousness of the situation. Panic set in when she realized there would be no respawn, no second chances, no coming back from death. Jeshu nervously bit her nails, trembling as she remembered her family's warnings about demons. What had once sounded like exaggerated stories had suddenly become terrifyingly real. She recalled a recent dream in which her grandfather had warned her about hidden dangers. Advice she had dismissed as fantasy now echoed through her mind as a desperate warning to survive. Even in shock, she knew they had to act. Kier looked at Lun with newfound admiration, declaring that she was ready to fight beside him and trust him with her life. The other girls awkwardly apologized, reluctantly admitting they had underestimated him. Weapon in hand, Jaisu fired at the enemy and challenged Lun to prove himself, her voice filled with both expectation and pressure. Their confidence didn't last long. Every attack struck nothing but empty air before fading away like dust. With one slow, careless gesture, the demon unleashed a shockwave that sent the girls flying as though they were nothing more than discarded toys. They crashed onto the cold stone floor, gasping for breath, fully realizing that another attack like that would erase them without a trace. Keeping a cool head, Lun ignored the panic around him and focused entirely on his opponent, desperately searching for even the slightest weakness in the demon's defenses. The demon, its voice dripping with icy hatred, dismissed any thought of resistance and swore to kill anyone who stood in its way. It launched a barrage of razor-sharp fragments, and in a desperate attempt to survive, Lun raised a mirror in front of himself, praying the artifact would hold. The plan failed. The mirror barely withstood the impact. Then, from its surface, a bizarre creature suddenly emerged, a chubby pig, radiating an overwhelming aura that froze everyone in place. Without taking his eyes off the enemy, Lun ordered the girls not to cross the barrier. Without its protection, they would be wiped out in seconds. His tone left no room for argument. He warned Kier that his defense was reaching its limit, and that she would soon have to make a move. If the barrier collapsed, everyone would die. She tried to argue, but Lun cut her off immediately. Their weapons were useless in this fight, and any reckless move would only speed up their deaths. Feng, who was used to relying on herself, struggled to accept that reality, frustration burning deep inside her. A storm of irritation and admiration for Lun's unwavering confidence exploded inside Feng. The tears that had once come from fear now fueled an unbreakable determination. Pressing a fist against her chest, she loudly swore her loyalty to him, even going so far as to declare herself his wife, as though he were the only thing keeping everyone alive in the middle of that disaster. As the barrier shattered, the young man glanced over at her. A calm smile, filled with unexpected warmth, spread across his face, giving her the strength she desperately needed. Behind her, Kier's friends, crushed by the weight of the moment, embraced each other through silent tears. It felt like a final farewell. Everyone there had already accepted that the young man wasn't walking away from this battle alive. Without hesitation, he stepped through the broken barrier and faced the demon. They got straight to the point, as if they were simply picking up an unfinished conversation. Huang Shen narrowed her eyes, dripping sarcasm with every word. Her voice carried a twisted hunger. She was already dividing up the group's souls as though they were hunting trophies waiting to be displayed. High above, hidden in the shadows of the cavern ceiling, the third prince watched everything with elegant indifference. To him, it was nothing more than entertainment, and he was curious to see just how long this mortal would keep defying the inevitable. The young man wasted no time. He threw out a shadow seal and charged at his opponent, moving so fast it looked like he was flying. Black chains burst forward, binding the demon in place, and without giving her a chance to recover, he unleashed a relentless barrage of talismans. The very air trembled under the intensity of the assault. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. It was as if the battlefield itself had joined his side. A split second later, he closed the distance. Punches rained down from every direction in a relentless combination designed to crack through Huang Shen's defenses. The girls watched in amazement, but they also understood the harsh reality. Without an incredibly powerful subclass to sustain that pace, his energy wouldn't last much longer. Watching from above, the prince reached exactly the same conclusion. The prince's skepticism was obvious. To him, technology without overwhelming power was nothing more than a useless toy, and boredom was already tempting him to leave. Then everything changed. His expression shifted instantly. Indifference vanished, replaced by pure shock as he leaned forward in disbelief. The impossible had happened. The demon, a being of absolute power, let out a genuine scream of pain. Tessier stood frozen, unable to understand how something so impossible could happen. The mood among the girls changed immediately. Pride shined in their eyes, as though his achievement belonged to all of them. The hopeless acceptance of death disappeared, replaced by overwhelming hope. The contempt they had shown him only minutes earlier melted away into genuine respect and silent apologies. Doubling over in agony, Huang Shen dropped to her knees with a furious roar. Wiping the blood from her lips, she demanded to know how a mere human had broken through her defenses. Lun simply smiled, keeping the answer to himself with a playful expression, suggesting that she had underestimated him. The truth was simple. Mastering the 9 channels had unlocked the Emperor's hidden potential, pushing his physical limits to an entirely new level. Every strange and punishing training session had finally paid off. Even wounded, the demon refused to retreat. The hatred burning in her eyes made one thing perfectly clear. This had only been the warm-up. Stretching out her arms, she summoned the purple dragon dance. Ghostly figures emerged from the void, charging toward the young man with horrifying speed. They had no flesh, yet their gaping jaws radiated such predatory hunger that everyone's blood ran cold. Even the prince watching from above lost his relaxed composure. For the first time, he frowned, realizing the situation had grown far beyond a simple trial. The girls shouted frantic warnings to Lun, but he remained perfectly calm. In a single instant, he analyzed the battlefield and realized there was no escaping the spiritual storm closing in around him. Time had run out. It was all or nothing. With flawless timing, Kier threw the blue artifact toward him. Lun immediately understood her intention. The instant he caught it, he activated his wind wings. Relief washed over him. Taking to the sky was his only chance of surviving, but the moment he lifted off the ground, 3 purple dragons surrounded him. Every movement from that point on would mean the difference between life and death. From below, the demon calmly clasped her hands together and declared that all of his resistance was meaningless. She was used to absolute domination, and every word reflected her complete confidence in victory. With murderous contempt, she swore that none of them would leave alive, directing her hatred especially toward anyone foolish enough to stand beside Lun. Terror once again consumed the group. Watching from below, Kier's companions completely broke down, crying as though they were already attending the young man's funeral. Struggling to maintain even a shred of composure, Feng dropped to her knees before them and forced herself to smile, desperately trying to inspire hope. She could barely hold on to herself. Then the attack came. One of the dragons, faster than the others, sank its fangs deep into him. The young man froze, his face twisting in unbearable pain. His eyes lost focus, and his body seemed unable to process the severity of the wound. The girl's panic reached its peak. To them, this was the beginning of the end. Kier immediately took command with ice-cold resolve, ordering everyone to regroup and prepare to seize any opening they could find. Her voice was as firm as steel. High above them, Lun forced his exhausted mind to its limit, tracking every movement around him, while desperately searching for any path out of the nightmare closing in. The young man desperately tried to buy himself a few more precious seconds. The demon princess, clearly frustrated, watched in fury as his quick thinking kept ruining her plans at the worst possible moment. But time wasn't on her side either. As the trap closed in, his flight became slower and less steady. The freedom his wings gave him was being swallowed by exhaustion. Then his health suddenly plummeted. His breathing faltered, and a series of dry coughs echoed through the air. Watching from below, the girls felt terror wash over them, as if they were sharing his pain. The reason was deadly. The poison from the beast's bites was eating away at him from the inside. His thoughts became sluggish, and the world around him seemed to melt into a blurry haze. Luckily, he still had the pills Pixie had given him. He swallowed the last of them, barely holding on to consciousness just long enough to keep fighting for a few more moments. He realized there was no point in running. Escape would only lead to defeat. He had to attack. He replayed the demon's words in his mind, searching for a hidden weakness buried beneath her threats. The answer had to be there, right in front of him. With what looked like suicidal determination, he dove straight toward her. But behind that reckless charge was nothing but careful calculation. He circled the battlefield, waiting for the exact moment when the energy powering his wings would run out. He needed to look completely vulnerable. For the briefest instant, his body flickered, becoming little more than a shadow. For the first time, fear flashed across the demon's face. She barely had time to react. The young man appeared right behind her and wrapped his arms around her with crushing force, stealing the breath from both of them. Her confidence finally began to crack. Then the system confirmed it. Her control over the creatures had been severed. Without their master guiding them, the beasts lost their purpose. Their bloodlust, now completely out of control, immediately turned toward the closest target. The creatures, confused and leaderless, attacked their own master. The young man leaped backward and watched the chaos unfold. The power she had summoned turned against its creator, shattering the demon's body like glass struck by a sledgehammer. With her death, the dark barrier dissolved, the air became breathable again, and the protective dome vanished, leaving the battlefield in complete silence. The team stood frozen in shock, struggling to process what had just happened. When reality finally sank in, the cave erupted with celebration. Watching from a distance, the prince couldn't hide his surprise. The young man had exceeded every expectation, becoming someone worthy of serious attention. Meanwhile, the system flooded everyone with reward notifications, handing out rare treasures that proved just how significant the victory had been. They were now closer than ever to unlocking the secret weapon. The girls rushed over to him, celebrating with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Noticing how close everyone was getting, Kier reacted immediately, clearly jealous. She ordered the others to back off and then kissed the young man, making it crystal clear where she stood. The display irritated the rest of the group, who saw it as an unnecessary claim of ownership. Ignoring the awkward tension, the young man handed out healing potions and shifted everyone's attention back to strategy. Recovering was critical because an even greater threat was still waiting for them. Before they could catch their breath, someone stepped out of the shadows. The stranger slowly applauded, his calm demeanor making him even more unsettling. Without hesitation, the young man stepped in front of the group, shielding them, and demanded to know who the newcomer was. The question seemed to offend the mysterious observer. The already tense atmosphere became unbearably heavy heavy when the man's true identity was revealed. Just hearing his name left everyone frozen. The prince stepped forward with a calm, controlled voice and made an offer that stunned everyone present. He invited the young man to become his brother. The offer of protection sounded almost too generous to refuse. But everything changed in the blink of an eye. Before the young man could even process the proposal, a heavy thud echoed through the cave. His body slammed against the rocky ground, leaving the entire group horrified. Kier immediately ran to the prince, dropped to her knees, and begged for mercy, desperately trying to excuse the young man's actions as nothing more than youthful inexperience. Ninja walked over to examine him, and the diagnosis came almost instantly. It wasn't the battle that had brought him down. The poison from the beast's bites had finally reached his nervous system. She delivered the news in a calm, emotionless voice, making it even more terrifying. Time was running out, and any hesitation would cost him his life. The joy of victory disappeared in an instant, replaced by icy despair. For the first time, Kier swallowed her pride and asked the prince for help. Wearing a stern expression, he agreed, but only under certain conditions. He could remove the poison that remained outside the body, but the rest would have to be handled by the girls themselves. The treatment sounded simple enough in theory, but it required transferring energy directly through intense physical contact at the site of the wound. The atmosphere instantly grew awkward. Jeshu also stepped forward, determined to ignore her embarrassment if it meant saving his life. Kier turned to Meikiao, reminding her of their duty and of the priceless value of the man who had just saved them all. The prince quietly observed the group, noticing an unusual blend of auras unlike anything he had seen before. After a long moment of hesitation and jealousy that felt almost ridiculous considering the situation, Macias finally agreed, as long as everyone put their petty arguments aside. The prince, already losing patience with their delay, urged them to begin immediately. The urgency became undeniable when the young man suddenly coughed, blood staining his lips. The poison wasn't going to wait for anyone. The blood pouring from his wound was the final trigger. There was no more time to hesitate. Tezier stepped forward and carefully exposed the injured area with trembling but steady hands, revealing the full extent of the damage. His skin glowed with a sickly, unnatural light, making the poison's spread painfully obvious. The moment she made contact, a violent surge of energy exploded from his body. A golden beam shaped like a dragon shot toward the ceiling, forcing everyone to stumble backward in shock. Remaining perfectly calm, the prince explained that this overwhelming power was the result of an intense shared training method, one that would have drained anyone else dry. Realizing the others had frozen, Kier barked an order. Nobody had time to stand around, and the young man couldn't wait any longer. Lunyan opened his eyes. He regained consciousness in time to stop the chaos, trying to sound firm despite his weak voice. The third prince, who had been watching everything unfold, stepped closer to inspect the results. He calmly looked over the situation as if it were nothing more than another move in a much larger game. Without wasting a second, he gave Lunyan a pill. A golden breath flowed past his lips, accompanied by a confident promise that he would recover completely. The system confirmed it almost immediately. The dragon poison had been completely purged. The purple color surrounding the wound faded away, and the oppressive feeling in the air finally disappeared. Nia casually brushed her hair back and confidently declared that, from that moment on, the young man was officially part of her group. It wasn't an invitation, it was a decision. Lunyan tried to argue, but nobody cared enough to listen. As the prince prepared to leave, he tossed something toward the young man. Lunyan caught it on instinct, closing his hand around a golden tube. Inside, he found a scroll along with several gold bars. The gift was practical, but its timing felt strangely out of place. The gift seemed more like an obligation than a gesture of kindness. With a graceful motion, Nia opened a golden portal. She wished him luck with a brief smile before stepping through the light and vanishing without a trace, just as suddenly as she had appeared. But right before crossing over completely, she snapped her fingers. A pulse of energy shot toward Lunyan's thigh, leaving behind a lotus-shaped mark. The symbol carried an unsettling authority, and Lunyan stared at it in disbelief. The location alone felt like a cruel joke, and knowing it had been branded onto his body made his blood boil with frustration. High above the clouds, Nia flew through the sky, completely satisfied with the chaos she had left behind. She had completed the task her mother entrusted to her, and watching everything unfold had made the journey far more entertaining. Her mother's constant reminders about Mentor Wen's orders echoed in her thoughts. Everything revolved around the reincarnated emperor. Floating through the sky, slightly exhausted, she wondered whether the mark she had left behind would be enough to keep Lunyan alive until the end of his journey. In the end, she pushed the thought aside. There were still demons roaming the world, and ignoring them wasn't a mistake she intended to make. Meanwhile, the approach to the Temple of Peace carried a dark omen. The usual silence had been replaced by an icy pressure that seemed to crush everyone's spirit. A portal ripped open in the air, spilling out members of the Underworld Guild, veterans hardened by countless brutal battles. Keeping a safe distance, Yang revealed the truth. The rumors about demons infiltrating the land weren't rumors at all, they were real. The guild leader simply shrugged with arrogant confidence, reminding everyone that they were descendants of Emperor Fengdu, making them untouchable. The group's attention shifted toward a quiet lake ahead. It wasn't the water that caught their eyes, but the crimson smoke rising from its surface, radiating a nauseating energy. The two girls dressed in black and white froze in place and shouted a warning. Their leader reacted a split second too late, and there was no time to argue. Zombie-like figures tore through the wall of red smoke, charging forward with insatiable hunger. Each zombie bore sinister symbols carved into its forehead, making it obvious they weren't ordinary undead. The two guards wasted no time. They activated their chains and formed a defensive wall in front of their master, fully prepared to die if necessary. The signal to attack rang out, and the peaceful atmosphere exploded into complete chaos. Countless undead kept clawing their way out of the ground, turning their overwhelming numbers into a living nightmare. Realizing brute force alone wouldn't be enough, Yang summoned his dark sword. With one precise swing, the blade split into hundreds of shadowy spikes, carving a bloody path straight through the horde. Stepping out of the shadows, Hong Gang watched the battle unfold with the smile of someone enjoying a stage performance. He was the face of the Stellar Guild, one of the 6 most powerful organizations in the world. Beside him, his bespectacled assistant calmly rattled off information about the enemy with an almost irritating level of composure. Hong Gang himself walked toward the girls, proudly introducing himself. His intentions were obvious. He tried to recruit them by promising wealth, influence, and power under the banner of his guild. The assistant took things even further, turning the pitch into a cheesy sales presentation while showering his boss with ridiculous praise. That was the last straw for the local guild leader, who saw the whole display as a direct insult. A brilliant blue aura erupted around his body, making it painfully clear that bloodshed was only moments away. The girls didn't even bother pretending to be polite. They mocked the offer outright and demanded that the opportunists leave immediately. The change was instant. The blonde man who had been overflowing with confidence just seconds earlier was now flat on the ground, clinging to the dirt and begging for mercy like a complete coward. Panicking, the assistant desperately invoked his prestigious family name and his influential brother, hoping political connections would make up for the humiliation. He threatened that the Stellar Guild would hunt the girls down no matter where they went. He never got to finish the sentence. A heavy gold bar smashed into the back of his head with a dull crack, instantly wiping out nearly half of his health bar. The rest of the guild rushed toward Hong Gang, frantically searching for the mysterious attacker. Hidden in the shadows, the reincarnated emperor watched with a satisfied smile. The throw had been perfect, though he couldn't help feeling annoyed that each gold bar cost 500,000 gold ingots. Hong Gang frowned and demanded to know which fool dared interfere with his business. Casually flipping more gold bars through his fingers, as though they were spare change, Lunyan answered that he had a habit of protecting people from pointless harassment. Then, to make his point crystal clear, he hurled 3 more gold bars straight at the Stellar Guild, openly challenging them. While the Stellar Guild was still recovering from the blows, Lunyan turned his attention to the Underworld Guild. Activating his clairvoyance, he carefully analyzed each member, identifying their classes and combat abilities. Their lineup was dangerous. They included Fengu warriors capable of summoning spirit beasts, and even calling legendary heroes of the past back into battle. The enemy guild leader tried to find a logical weakness, shouting that attacks like this couldn't possibly be sustainable, and that Lunyan would eventually run out of money. Mrs. Feng calmly crushed that argument. Her Golden Formula Corporation, she explained, could provide unlimited funding for any conflict. The red-haired restaurant owner stepped forward and declared she would invest whatever amount was necessary without worrying about the cost. Jisoo also voiced her complete support, making it clear there wasn't a hint of doubt in her mind. What had started as one young man's fight unexpectedly became a united front standing firmly behind Lunyan. Now backed by a powerful alliance, his supporters openly exchanged contemptuous looks with their opponents. The members of the Stellar Guild immediately turned pale. Those families weren't merely influential, they were the giants of their generation. What had looked like an ordinary street fight had suddenly escalated into a political and financial clash between the world's elite. Enjoying every second of it, Lunyan casually tossed a massive gold bar into the air like it was nothing more than a rubber ball. Thanks to the ability he inherited from Nia and the fortune at his disposal, he didn't hesitate for a second. He hurled the gold bar at full force toward his next target. The impact was devastating. The solid gold projectile smashed straight through the man's defenses like a cannonball, crushing his face and dropping his health bar to the brink of zero. Trying to keep up appearances as panic spread through his ranks, Hong Gang shouted that money couldn't buy real skill in a game. Lunyan didn't waste time arguing. He answered with a storm of flying gold. One gold bar after another shot through the air like meteors, striking their targets with incredible precision. Within moments, the battlefield was empty. Epic equipment was abandoned in the desperate retreat, and player after player collapsed unconscious, proving that in this world, wealth could speak even louder than talent. Only the murmurs of the survivors remained as they realized they had just attacked the vice leader of an untouchable guild. Acting like a practical accountant, Lunyan started picking up the items left behind, hoping to recover some of the gold he had spent. The girls, however, stopped him before he could continue. They cut off his search for spare change, insisting that junk like that wasn't worthy of him and offering everything they owned without asking for anything in return. Jisoo gave him a faint smile before offering something far beyond small favors. She hinted at billions in resources, as long as he was willing to spend his life by her side. Caught off guard by suddenly becoming the center of attention for such powerful women, Lunyan finally relaxed. The weight of the moment eased, and with the tension gone, the two girls thanked him for saving them. He brushed it off casually, downplaying the heroics and treating it like it was nothing special. The group's leader, Xiaoyanmo, stepped forward to personally express his gratitude, introducing himself with proper respect. Lunyan didn't stand on ceremony. He shook his hand, gave his own name, and introduced his companions as a united team, keeping everything professional. Xiaoyanmo studied him carefully. Even though the young man was still climbing in level, he carried himself with an authority that didn't match his current rank. Without wasting time, he proposed an alliance to take down the area's boss. The handshake sealed the deal, and they immediately began planning their strategy. Xiang interrupted with a harsh reality check. The boss possessed overwhelming destructive power, and without elite tanks, the entire team would be wiped out. Lunyan reacted immediately by posting a recruitment notice across the game's network. Mrs. Feng joined in, announcing an outrageous payment. Applications flooded in almost instantly as dozens of heavily armored players with massive defense stats rushed to volunteer. Off in the distance, Hong Gang watched with a mocking grin, laughing at the idea that anyone would actually dare join them. Still bent over from the beating he had taken earlier, he started throwing out threats. With the confidence of someone who ruled the server, the blonde woman warned that her guild would make every volunteer's life a living hell. Then she played her trump card, bringing up the server's most feared assassin, the one who never failed, whose shadow was the last thing players ever saw before permanent death. The mere mention of the legendary assassin sent a chill through the crowd. The applicants, who had been dazzled by the reward moments earlier, instantly turned pale and began backing away, choosing anonymity over mountains of gold. Kier tried raising the reward even higher, but not even money could buy courage from people terrified of permanent death. The blonde man smirked in satisfaction and mocked their efforts, claiming that in this world, money meant nothing compared to real influence. Kier's allies tried intimidating him by reminding him of the powerful families backing them. He simply smiled with complete confidence, talking as if he were teaching beginners a lesson. As the tension grew heavier, Lunyan quietly chuckled. He already had a plan, not just to clear the dungeon, but to break the speed record. The bold claim sent the members of the Stellar Guild into laughter. To them, Lunyan was nothing more than an arrogant rookie with no clue how dangerous the situation really was. Lunyan's wife, however, completely ignored their ridicule. Remaining perfectly calm, she suggested they tune out the crowd, trust their own strength, and stay focused on the objective. Determined to raise the stakes even higher, the blonde man made a poisonous offer. If they succeeded, he would kneel before them and withdraw his men from the dungeon. But if they failed, 2 of the girls would have to surrender themselves to him. The tension instantly reached its breaking point. The proposal was a disgusting insult that made everyone's blood boil. The atmosphere turned ice cold. The guild boss cut the conversation short, ordering everyone to stop talking about such ridiculous terms. The blonde woman ignored him completely, continuing her mockery while bragging about how unstoppable her tank was. Fan stepped forward like a walking fortress, proudly displaying his massive armor as proof of his superiority. The leader slapped him on the shoulder shoulder with satisfaction. Overflowing with pride, he bragged about his guild's strength, pointing to everything they had accomplished in just 1 week. Lun answered with nothing but contempt, casually hurling a gold bar straight at his opponent. To him, all that confidence was nothing but cheap theater. Fan reacted instantly, raising his reinforced shield, completely convinced it would block the attack. Lun's gold bar sliced through the shield as if it were made of paper. It tore through every layer of defense before striking its target with surgical precision. The impact left a devastating wound that couldn't be hidden. Hongan completely lost his composure, shaking with rage as he screamed empty threats and swore revenge. Yao stepped in before the situation turned into a massacre, demanding an end to the pointless hostility inside the dungeon. After coordinating with his team, the young man assured his allies that he had his own methods for clearing the dungeon. With the wager officially set, the underworld leader publicly placed his trust in Lun, declaring he had absolute confidence that their team would win the upcoming challenge. The president of Zvezda finalized the agreement, promising to honor every part of the deal without any tricks or excuses. At that exact moment, a brilliant flash split the sky, transforming the entire landscape. Xiao saw it as a good omen, while their rivals could only stare at one another in confusion, unable to understand the sudden change unfolding before their eyes. Lun wasted no time and accepted the system's challenge. The objective was clear: break the dungeon's speed record, earn fame, and make it easier to recruit new members in the future. The temple portal glowed, inviting them into the ultimate trial. The blonde man smirked, already acting as if victory was guaranteed. The moment they stepped through the portal, the group felt the crushing pressure of the place. The system sent out a notification about the boss rewards, completely changing the mood of the mission. Inside the temple, piles of bones were scattered everywhere, including human remains, making it obvious this was no ordinary place. Xiao took the lead, warning everyone that the boss unleashed a devastating attack every 30 seconds, one that only tanks could survive. Lun brushed the warning aside, saying he'd focus on offense first and deal with the damage afterward. One of the young men volunteered to help, mentioning his special bloodline and support abilities, but the leader didn't seem to grasp the importance of what he was saying. There was a brief moment of hesitation. The protagonist's silence left Xiao visibly embarrassed, her face turning bright red. Noticing her discomfort, the reincarnated emperor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and calmly told her everything was under control. Ignoring every suggestion, the leader decided to handle the fight on his own, ordering the rest of the team to focus entirely on attacking. Without wasting another second, he unleashed an ancient technique and summoned an infernal demon onto the battlefield. The creature was small and surrounded by blazing flames. It looked harmless at first, until its overwhelming destructive power became obvious. The girls immediately sensed the danger and warned their leader. The boss had arrived. The system announced Hysen's appearance and offered a cinematic flashback. Lun accepted, hoping to gather information about his opponent. The vision was disturbing. The demon cornered a young woman, demanding her submission while threatening to kill her partner. The system emphasized that it was only a recorded memory, but the atmosphere became unbearably tense. Lun immediately skipped the scene, brushing it off as an overly dramatic cutscene from the game's developers. Hysen appeared in the flesh, radiating an overwhelming aura. With his all-seeing eye activated, Lun immediately realized the truth. This wasn't a monster, it was an elite player. Taking command without hesitation, he assigned everyone's positions, placing the team strategically to surround the target while he charged in for a direct confrontation. Lun shut down Hysen's movements, leaving him with no chance to counterattack. His plan was to draw all of the enemy's aggression onto himself, creating a safe opening for everyone else. The team attacked in perfect sync. The red-haired girl struck from behind with a slash that tore through the air, carving away a massive chunk of the enemy's health bar. The underworld fighters followed up, keeping relentless pressure on the boss. One of the allies turned the battlefield into a sea of flames and non-stop attacks, but he never stopped watching Lun, worried about how much strain their leader was under. Even under that pressure, Lun simply smiled and pointed to his own aura. A regeneration skill activated, healing his wounds in real time. As his health recovered, he raised a crimson circular shield, deflecting incoming attacks and keeping the enemy locked down. Zhao and Yang watched in amazement at his unbelievable endurance. Lun didn't waste the opportunity. He unleashed another healing spell that flooded the battlefield with restorative energy, revitalizing everyone nearby. Kier's doubts vanished, replaced by renewed determination. and she charged straight at the boss. Suddenly, Lun's expression changed. He sensed a shift in the boss's attack pattern and shouted for everyone near the impact zone to retreat immediately. 1 second later, gigantic vines burst from the ground, whipping through the air and tearing apart everything in their path. Anyone who failed to move in time was hit head-on. Without hesitation, Lun crossed his arms in a defensive stance, preparing to absorb the full force of the attack. It was a dangerous strategy. He intended to become the only target, protecting the rest of the team and ensuring their offensive never stopped. The attack crashed into him like a tidal wave of raw power. The impact was devastating, ripping away a huge portion of his health bar, but he never wavered. Not even the crushing force of his opponent could break his resolve. After confirming that everyone else was still standing, he announced that the first phase was over and signaled for the battle to continue. The team answered without hesitation, sticking to the plan exactly as they had practiced. The pace never slowed. The group launched one relentless assault after another, leaving the boss with no room to breathe. Realizing he was being pushed to his limit, the boss began gathering energy for one final desperate attack. Seeing it coming, Lunian quickly prepared a powerful defensive barrier. Consumed by blind rage, the demon let out a deafening roar that echoed throughout the entire temple, vowing to wipe them all out. The counterattack exploded with terrifying force, dropping every player's HP in an instant. Lunian reacted immediately, raising a massive wooden shield to absorb as much of the impact as possible and protect his allies. Almost instantly, green spheres appeared around the group, acting like cushions against the incoming damage. One of the girls was surprised to see the protective system completely absorb the attack, but she stayed focused, knowing the worst was still ahead. Looking at her interface, she noticed her HP steadily recovering on its own. Even in the middle of the chaos, Lun analyzed the situation. Their healing had its limits, but the team was still in the fight. Their odds of surviving were slim, prompting one of the allies to cautiously suggest using a forbidden power. A deep humming sound filled the air as a swirling vortex of energy formed above them. Jay raised his hand, calling upon spiritual forces. Without hesitation, he poured his energy into summoning Titan, a legendary beast capable of tracking the very essence of reality itself. The entity answered immediately, announcing its arrival with a deafening roar. A blinding light forced the women to shield their eyes, fearing the consequences of unleashing such overwhelming power. The instant Lun heard the thunderous cry, he realized the entire battle had changed. The creature descended from above. It resembled a massive lion with an enormous jaw and a single horn protruding from its forehead. Its mere presence warped the battlefield, whipping up violent winds that shook everything around it. When it opened its mouth, its roar sent tremors through the walls. Its glowing yellow eyes radiated an unnatural intensity, crushing everyone beneath a pressure so overwhelming they could barely breathe. This no longer felt like a game, it felt terrifyingly real. Cold sweat rolled down Lun's face as he stared at the beast. Titan, with its ability to see directly into a person's soul, examined everyone present, judging its summoner to determine whether he was worthy. Moving with astonishing speed, the creature approached and demanded to know what gave them the audacity to summon it. Its deep voice carried nothing but disdain for the weakness of the mortals standing before it. Jay stepped forward to protect his master without showing even a hint of fear. He was shocked, but just as excited. To him, facing a being of this caliber was simply part of the mission. At that moment, getting an answer from the beast mattered more than anything else. Faced with such overwhelming danger, the girls dropped to their knees and carefully approached the ancient beast, hoping to calm its anger. Meanwhile, the battle against the demon continued at full speed. Their enemy showed no signs of slowing down, keeping up a relentless assault. Using his monk abilities, Lunian surrounded himself with golden chains of spiritual energy to strengthen his body and endure the punishment. He carefully tracked every movement the enemy made, knowing a devastating attack was coming. Even while cornered, he remained calm and ordered the team to keep attacking without stopping. Trying to soften the beast's attitude, Jay walked forward with a restrained smile and pulled out a juicy fried chicken leg. The mouth-watering aroma instantly filled the air, immediately catching the creature's attention. Holding it out with both hands, he promised an even bigger feast if necessary. It worked. Titan's fierce expression melted away, becoming almost childlike at the sight of the food. Accepting the bribe, the beast agreed to help, partly because it recognized Jay's bloodline and his connection to the Fengdu Emperor. While the beast happily devoured its snack, the battle raged on. Lunian, however, was beginning to reach his limit. His regeneration could no longer keep up with the damage, and his body showed obvious signs of exhaustion. With his health bar falling into dangerous territory, he swallowed a recovery potion and unleashed a blazing fire technique, determined to break the stalemate before it was too late. Even after hearing their pleas, the creature initially ignored everything, treating the battle as nothing more than a trivial game played by lesser beings. Its interest was only sparked when it noticed the classless fighter radiating imperial power. Letting out a mighty roar, the beast summoned the enormous seal of its homeland, flooding the battlefield with blinding light. The pressure was so immense that, for the first time, the demon actually stepped back, unable to hide its genuine fear. Desperate, the monster tried to intercept the seal before it could strike. It was hopeless. A colossal mass of energy crashed down from the heavens, slamming the demon into the ground with a deafening explosion followed by the sickening sound of bones shattering. The beast calmly walked toward the crater, studying the defeated enemy to determine how much demonic energy remained. It warned the group that, because of the world's restrictions, it couldn't completely erase the demon. A fragment of its power would survive. That was all the opening they needed. Sensing the chance to finish the battle, Lunan poured every ounce of strength he had left into activating all of his talismans. Seeing the enemy's health bar hanging by a thread, the entire team unleashed their ultimate techniques at the exact same moment. Lady Feng led the charge, hammering the demon with an endless barrage of attacks. Fighting in perfect sync, the group surged forward to seal the victory, leaving their enemy with absolutely no chance to launch one final counterattack. The demon's resistance finally gave out. Under the team's final barrage, its body shattered into fragments before evaporating into thin air. The system immediately announced the mission's completion. The dungeon had been cleared. Word spread instantly that they had finished it in just 9 minutes. Outside the dungeon entrance, the reaction was pure shock. Chao and Lu Nian's ex-girlfriend stared at the notification screen, visibly shaken by the achievement. Members of the Star Guild were also gathered there. Many couldn't hide their surprise or their reluctance to admit their rivals had outperformed them. Their leader, however, was boiling with rage. To him, there was no way anyone could post a time like that without cheating. Throwing all ethics aside, he ordered his men to prepare an ambush. When one of his subordinates reminded him about the terms of the agreement and the oath they had sworn, he silenced the man with a brutal blow. Wearing a cynical grin, he declared that if everyone already saw him as the villain, there was no reason to play fair anymore. Meanwhile, the victors celebrated without restraint. The girls surrounded Lu Nian, hugging him as they celebrated their hard-earned victory. The system began listing the rewards: high-level staffs, powerful artifacts, piles of coins, and valuable crafting materials. Amid the flood of loot notifications, the reincarnated emperor locked onto one particular item. The helmet offered incredible defensive stats, but its appearance left much to be desired. Its bright green color completely clashed with Lu Nian's style, making it hard to look at. After thanking the beast for its help, the team received one final warning. They should remain cautious, because another encounter in the underworld was inevitable. Without wasting time, they stepped through the swirling portal of light, leaving the echoes of that battle behind. When it came time to divide the loot, So remained as composed as ever, openly acknowledging that Lu Nian probably could have defeated the boss by himself. Out of respect, she gave him first pick of the rewards. No one objected. His contribution to the victory was beyond question. He chose the meteoric iron, the helmet, and the dark stone. Although he hesitated at first, an ally reminded him that the true reward wasn't the treasure, it was the bonds they had strengthened along the way. With the loot safely packed away, Sierra opened the exit portal. Exhausted, the group stepped through, finally leaving the dungeon behind. Outside, a massive crowd had gathered, eager to hear every detail about their record-breaking clear. The atmosphere immediately turned tense. Lu Nian stepped between Xiao and Kier, tightening the group's formation. Members of the Star Guild blocked their path, demanding that they hand over every piece of loot they had earned. Their leader, Honggang, drew his sword with an arrogant smile, convinced that the exhausted winners had no chance of fighting back. Resisting them felt almost impossible. Running purely on willpower, Lu Nian forced himself to move, reaching for the talismans hidden up his sleeve. Realizing the danger, the girls exchanged quick glances and positioned themselves to hold off the attackers, buying him enough time to escape. But the Star Guild leader, obsessed with the treasure, ordered his men to seal every exit. Fate, however, had different plans. A violent thunderclap exploded across the sky, silencing the battlefield. Xiao stared coldly at the enemy leader before revealing the truth. The oath he had sworn earlier carried a hidden punishment that activated automatically if he betrayed it. The effect was immediate. Hellish flames erupted from nowhere, swallowing the man's body whole. The fire acted like an absolute judgment, ignoring every attempt to defend against it. The man screamed in terror as he felt his body falling apart. Far too late, he understood the price of his greed. Members of the Stellar Guild rushed to surround their leader, desperately casting ice spells in a futile attempt to extinguish the mystical flames. It was useless. The ice evaporated before it could even touch the fire, consuming his face and limbs. His body shook violently before collapsing to its knees, rapidly turning into charcoal. Even the earth itself seemed to reject his existence. The flames consumed every last trace of him until nothing remained. The once arrogant leader crumbled into ashes that were scattered by the breeze, leaving behind nothing but complete silence. Xiao watched the entire scene with obvious satisfaction, seeing the enemy destroyed by the consequences of his own betrayal. For a brief moment, she thought her mother would have handled the situation with even greater elegance. Once the flames finally disappeared, leaving behind only empty ground, the remaining guild members gathered together, whispering in panic. Fear spread through the crowd. They couldn't shake the horrifying possibility that this death wasn't reversible, that it had broken the game's most fundamental rule of resurrection. The confirmation hit them like ice water when they checked the interface. The status "dead" glowed with absolute certainty. According to the system, he had been killed by a force that didn't even exist within the game's own rules. Stunned, the players stared at their screens, searching for answers the server couldn't provide. Someone desperately suggested that demons must have been responsible, the only beings rumored to possess the power to erase a player forever. But their knowledge was limited to scattered legends and fragmented stories about companions who had vanished into forgotten abysses. While the new leader of the surviving players struggled to make sense of the chaos, the girls from the Underworld Guild remained completely unfazed. To them, the traitor had simply suffered divine punishment for breaking his sacred oath. Their cold indifference sent chills through everyone watching. Still blinded by anger, several men tried intimidating the girls, threatening to report them to the game administrators and accusing them of conspiring with demonic forces. At the mention of the administration, everyone fell silent, exhausted. Lun buried her face in her hands, feeling the weight of yet another unnecessary complication. Before the situation could spiral into something far worse, the leader of the Underworld Guild calmly stepped in. He assured everyone that they would personally answer to the local deity and accept full responsibility for whatever followed, with no need to drag outsiders into the matter or create an even bigger scandal. After a brief pause, the young man casually remarked that if people like Chang Fang or Nia were around, this whole situation would be settled without any effort. Clearly on edge, Xiao leaned in and whispered for him to stop talking. To her, casually throwing around names of people that important was downright insane. The other girls from the guild reacted the same way, eyeing him with growing suspicion. Clearly annoyed by his attitude, Jisoo stepped forward and demanded that he stop speaking about her leader's name so disrespectfully. Lu Nian's allies immediately closed ranks around him, reminding everyone that the young man carried marks proving his connection to beings of the highest rank. The tension between the two groups became unbearable. One wrong move was all it would take for violence to erupt. Sensing the opportunity, Kier smirked and mocked Jisoo, asking if she was jealous because her own master would never have access to people that influential. The blonde fired back, insisting it was impossible for someone with Lu Nian's background to know Nija, dismissing the entire story as a complete lie. But her voice wavered for just a moment, and Mrs. Feng caught the hesitation, answering with a smug grin of her own. Before the argument could explode into a fight, the guild leader ordered everyone to be silent. That was when Lu Nian calmly confirmed that he really did know Nija. The system reacted instantly. A flashing red notification appeared, announcing that the game's administrator would arrive in exactly 3 seconds. The atmosphere instantly turned suffocating. The countdown began, and a brilliant golden light ripped across the sky as an imposing figure slowly descended. Whatever punishment was coming, it wasn't going to wait. Yang reacted immediately, quietly warning her master that one of the Celestial King's elite warriors was on her way, and she didn't look interested in hearing anyone's explanation. The moment she landed, the ground shook beneath everyone's feet, forcing even the boldest players to instinctively step back. With a cold, a motionless gaze, the warrior got straight to the point. Reports of demonic pacts had reached her, and she had no intention of wasting time listening to excuses. Regaining her composure, Xiao knelt down and respectfully presented an envelope, hoping to calm the situation. For a brief moment, it actually seemed to work. The warrior's expression softened, and she even praised the young man's courtesy. But the relief didn't last. Her attention shifted to Lunian, whose obvious uneasiness immediately made her suspicious. Raising her hand, she pointed directly at him and declared without hesitation that he was the murderer. To the warrior, the logic was undeniable. He carried no trace of divine bloodline, which, in her eyes, was all the proof she needed. Mrs. Feng completely lost her temper at the accusation, bursting into furious protests while her friends desperately tried to quiet her before the situation escalated into an execution. Xiao tried to step in and protect Lu Nian, subtly suggesting that generous rewards could be arranged if certain details were quietly overlooked. Watching the attempted bribe unfold, the girl dressed in black frowned, already calculating how much of their fortune would have to be sacrificed to satisfy someone with that level of authority.